Hello, everyone. I'm Irina Korgan, Acting Director of the Asia Strategy Center at the Institute of Economics, Russian Academy of Sciences. It is a great pleasure to welcome all of you here. As pandemic is not loosening its grip on societies, it is important that we keep communication and flow of ideas alive to move us forward. It is a great honor for us today that Institute of Economics serves as a platform for academic exchange. We are very proud to host all of you here today at the conference 30 years of post-Soviet transition in Russia and CIS country, a view from East Asia. But of course, we have scholars not only from East Asia joining us today, but scholars from Russia and Europe. So we have a spectacular panel. To open the conference, I would like to invite first Deputy Director, Associate Member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, a renowned expert on financial economics, Russian financial system, Professor Mikhail Golovnin. Professor Golovnin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irina, and it's a great pleasure for me here to open this very interesting conference. This year we have a really prominent anniversary, a very contradictory anniversary, 30 years from the dissolution of the former USSR, and both this is the anniversary for the transition from planned to market economy in the whole group of countries of the former USSR. And I think it's a good idea somehow to evaluate the results of this transition. We have a very prominent research school in our institute, which was headed by Svetlana Glinkina and which was devoted to the estimates of results of post-socialist transformation in different regions, in post-Soviet region, in Central and Eastern Europe, and also the results of transformations in East Asian countries. So for me, it is very important that we have the discussion on the results of this transformation, not only from the point of view of the region, and not only from the point of view of Western experts, which usually estimate this transformation, but this is a very important point of view from East Asia, because we call our space post-Soviet space as Eurasian space. So it is between Europe and Asia, and it is very important also to have a look from Asia to our space, to our results. And we have some objectives for this, because there were great shifts in external economic relations of these countries from West to East. This is important for Russia. This is important, of course, for Central Asian countries. So there are really some objectives for this, and it's for me it is very important that we have here researchers from Japan, Korea, People's Republic of China, Philippines, and I think also from other countries. And I think it is very important to discuss these issues from this broad view, to have a view from different parts. And I hope that our discussion will really be very interesting, because now we have some researchers in the Institute, our own researchers, which devoted to the results of these transformations, and there will be some articles, some reports devoted to it. And I think this is important that we started this discussion because the actual anniversary will be in December, but we started beforehand. And it's very interesting that we started from the view from East Asia. I think it's very important. The day starts from Asia and we start our discussion from Asia too. So I think we will have a very interesting reports today, and I wish hopeful good discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Golovnin. So now I think we have our conference open, and indeed we hope to have a very fruitful discussion. Since the opening ceremony is now over and ahead of us is only the main session, I suggest that we start now. Well, if you don't mind, if you need perhaps a short break, then we can wait, of course. But since we don't have that much time for discussion allotted in the program, perhaps it will be a good idea to start. Professor Kumo, I hope, since you are the first in our program, I hope it will be okay with you if we start a little bit earlier. All right. So, but before we start, I would like to announce a few housekeeping issues. As we discussed, the allotted time for each presentation is 15 minutes, and from 12 to 15 minutes. And if we have time, we will accept some questions after each presentation. And if there is no time, then we will leave our questions till the discussion section, which is at the end of the conference. And I encourage all of you to use chat for asking your questions, just in order to optimize the use of time. Either I will forward questions to our participants, or perhaps you will have an opportunity to receive an answer in a written form. So just don't waste opportunities of chat. And also, before we proceed, I would like to say a few words about the idea behind the conference. Although Professor Golovnin has already summarized it nicely, but what we wanted also to show with this conference is the diversity of Russian studies in East Asia. When I myself had an opportunity to work in countries of East Asia, I was very much surprised with how detailed East Asian scholars are when studying Russia. And sometimes they touch very narrow subjects. And it was quite surprising for me. And I wanted to show that mosaic of Russian studies in East Asia here in Russia, and to provide an opportunity for Russian, European, and East Asian scholars to discuss various issues of Russian economic development, of Commonwealth, of independent state development, and perhaps to have new ideas and to have a new stimulus for developing Russian studies all over the world. And as Professor Golovnin has already mentioned, we have this anniversary of the tremendous change that happened in the world 30 years ago, dissolution of the USSR, that provoked many changes, not only to the post-Soviet space, but to the world economy and world politics as well. So I hope that we can touch upon various aspects of this issue in our today's session. And without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor of Economics at the Institute of Economic Research at Hitatsubashi University in Tokyo, Professor Kazuhiro Kumo. Professor Kumo is a well-known scholar on Russian demography. He published extensively on the topic and on this theme, and I think he's one of the well-known scholars in this domain. So Professor Kumar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Could I share my file? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for giving me a chance to present my research at this meeting. I'd like to acknowledge a debt of gratitude to the Vice Director, Mikhail Yuryevich, and to the Chair and the Coordinator, Dr. Korogan, Irina Alexandrovna. As Professor Korogan introduced, I am Kazuhiro Kumo from the Institute of Economic Research, Hitotsubashi University, Tokyo, Japan. My research field is economic demography, economic geography, and regional economies in the former Soviet Union and Russia. This time, I'd like to show the latest research results on the analysis of fertility determinants in Russia. As you all may know, fertility in Russia shows the same trend with economic activity. I mean, first under deterioration, then recovered, but after the introduction of sanction in connection with Crimean incidents, fertility was depressed again. What was striking was that majority of previous studies showed that household income did not affect women's fertility in Russia. The results obtained so far were honestly ambiguous, but already 30 years have passed since the beginning of transition. So we have enough household data already. I mean, it is the time to reevaluate the factors determining fertility in Russia. Let me briefly check the fertility trends in Russia. Although this is said to be just like to show the way of life to Buddha in Japanese, you know. But anyway, it is well announced that the huge population loss during the revolution, the Civil War, and World War II induced pro-natalist measures in the Soviet Union. And the socialist states generally maintained reproductive level of fertility until their collapse, in contrast with lower fertility in West. But after the demise of the planned economies, we saw rapid weakening of the network of social child care support and increased direct child care cost. Catastrophic shrinkage of the economy in transition led fertility in Russia under 1.2 in 1999 and 2000. However, in 2000s, various economic incentives such as increase of child care allowance, among them was famous mother's capital, were introduced to increase fertility. There exists positive correlation between gross domestic products and fertility, as you can grasp from this figure. But this does not show the direct causality between these two indicators. The effects of economic factors should be examined carefully. And the effects of such factors must differ among people whose subjective well-being differ. And as you know, the analysis of causes and effects requires household data, which identifies individual characteristics. We're talking about the previous studies. Analysis based on the household data started in 2000 only, although the results were not clear-cut. What I should point out here is, as mentioned, household income did not affect fertility in Russia. And analysis on the effects of subjective well-being is all the more limited in Russia. If looking at studies on other advanced or developing economies, positive household income effects and negative effects of women's wage, the latter can be seen as opportunity costs, were generally confirmed. However, in Russia, household income or women's wage did not show significant effects on fertility, as written in this slide. However, I have to mention one point. All the previous studies presented here used per capita household income as an explaining variable. Honestly speaking, in the analysis of household decision making, it is rare to use simple per capita income. I will explain this later. Then, as for the effects of subjective well-being in other countries, subjective recognition and health status generally affect positively. In Russia, the results for the subjective well-being match with other countries, but those for health condition did not. Summing up, in Russia, both household income and women's wage are often insignificant. However, in the 2000s, household income may have a significant and positive result. I wonder, what does it mean? Possibly target period matter. The factors in 1990s were different from those in 2000s or what? Or problems of identification of household income involved. Because Russia became a more stable economy, we can now examine the possibility that household income has a significant positive effect on the probability of childbearing, and the possibility that women's wage attenuate the probability of childbearing as an opportunity cost, and the probability that health status and subjective well-being increase the probability of childbearing in a stable manner. In the analysis, we use Russia Longitudinal Monitoring Survey, which collected more than 10,000 of nationally representative individuals almost every year for my evaluation of fertility determinants. Again, we examine the effects of household income, women's wages, health status, and subjective well-being, their effects on fertility. And samples are women of 18 to 45 years old, the reproductive age. And we used from 1994 rounds to the 2018 round. And in order to keep the comparability with previous studies, we applied panel probability regression analysis. And to avoid endogeneity, we use working women only because the decision to work and to give birth are made simultaneously frequently. And we gave 1 year time lag for explaining variables, again, in order to avoid endogeneity. And one more point, as I said earlier, almost all the previous studies utilize simple per capita household income as an income variable. However, in the analysis of household decision-making, as I said, it is not usual because the household economy has a feature of increasing returns to scale. Therefore, we should use not per capita income, but equivalent scale household income. I mean, for example, in the case of equivalent scale household income, the first adult in the household is counted as 1, but the second or third ones are counted as 0.7, 0.5, and so on. And children are almost always counted as 0.5. So equivalent scale household income is always larger than simple per capita household income. And the more the household member is, the larger the difference is. Here are the descriptive statistics, but let me skip. But you can here confirm that the sample size was around 45,000 observations in panel regression. Then here is a summary of the results. The most important were, first, equivalent scale household income have a significant positive effect. However, simple per capita household income was not significant in this analysis either in any specification. Note that all the previous studies used simple per capita household income or total household income. Here we can point out the problem involved in the specification of household income in previous studies. And second, we could verify that women's own wage have a significant negative impact. Next, in order to see the changes in the effects of variables according to economic trends, we divided the target period and examined again. From 1995 to 2000, when the Russian economy began to shrink and then bottomed out, and until 2014, when the economy continued to grow and the birth rate generally continued to rise. And from 15 to 18, when the economic growth rate slowed down and the birth rate declined. And according to the results, it became clear that only from 1995 to 2000, income was not significant under any specification. I can say that household income did not generally promote fertility in the 1990s. In Professor Gary Becker's comparative income hypothesis, permanent income would affect fertility positively. But in 1990s, income might be regarded as fluctuating income. And this may be the reason why household income levels did not have positive effects on the probability of giving birth. Additionally, the analysis confirmed that subjective well-being and health conditions affected positively. Let me conclude. In 1990s, household income did not affect fertility. As I explained, this might show that people regarded its income as fluctuating income because of uncertain atmosphere at that time in Russia. Both I and my colleague Ichiro, Professor Iwasaki, who will talk after the next war in Moscow in 1992. So we both know well about the turmoil at that time. But in 2000s and afterward, higher household income, good health, and subjective well-being increase fertility and women's wage decreases it. The insignificant role of household income might be a phenomenon specific to transitional period only. What I'd like to emphasize here is that no previous study could grasp the effects of household income, women's wage, and health conditions on the probability of giving birth in the right way. But this study could. The analysis showed consistent and intuitively understandable effects of these factors on fertility. However, the future is still ambiguous. Although mother's capital is expanding and some other measures to promote childbirth are introduced, their effects are not clear. As you know, since 2015, fertility is continuously decreasing in spite of the existence of expanded mother's capital. So the evaluation of policy measures is still tasks ahead for us. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kumo, for a very interesting presentation that gives us more insight into problems of childbirth in Russia. And I think we can accept 1 to 2 questions. Do you have any questions to Professor Kumo? Then I'll use my position as a moderator and I would like to ask a short question. Professor Kumo, in your opinion, why increase in women's wages doesn't impact fertility rates positively? Wouldn't having more financial means to raise a child somehow give incentive to women to give more birth? Thank you.
Can I? Okay, very briefly. I said that the women's wage can be regarded as an opportunity cost. If women are forced to raise children, then they have to possibly leave from the working place. Then they will lose their income. And the higher the income, the cost will be larger. This is what I mean.
Okay, thank you. And just another very brief question. How does results in Russia compare to perhaps Japan or international result, if you just have any insight?
Okay, thank you. What was striking is, as I said, in 1990s, it was very strange. Russia gave a very strange results. I mean, household income did not affect positively. But now, after 2010 or onwards, Russia seems to be one of the normal economies currently. That is what I mean.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kumu. And we are ready to move on to our next speakers. And I would like to introduce a presentation by two authors, Ilya Viktorov, a research fellow at the Department of Economic History and International Relations of Stockholm University in Sweden, and Alexander Abramov, head of the Laboratory for Analysis of Institutions and Financial Markets at the Financial Academy of, if I'm not mistaken, it's written RANEPA, anyway, at RANEPA in Russia. So as I was informed, Professor Viktorov will present the results of their research. So Professor Viktorov, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I'm happy to participate in this conference. Even though I'm currently reside in Europe, I was a research fellow at Slavic Eurasian Research Center in Sapporo and visited on numerous occasions Russian-related conferences in Japan, and could see which huge potential and realized potential already that East Asian researchers from China, South Korea, Mongolia, and Japan have regarding studies of Russia. So I'll start with my presentation and share it. It's co-authored with Professor Alexander Abramov, who is also here. And the title is The Rise of Collateral-Based Finance Under State Capitalism in Russia. This presentation is based on an article that we recently published, still online, in Post-Communist Economist journal. It's a special issue that will contain also other articles devoted to different post-communist economies like Hungary and Moldova. So, state capitalism is a definition that we use in this article, and by this we simply understand an economic system where the state owns key assets and controls the main financial flows, while state-owned business entities act like quasi-independent market players with the primary purpose of profit maximization. So this moment of profit maximization of state-controlled entities is very important one. So financial system in Russia has been, we can characterize it as an unholy alliance between fragilities typical for speculative finance and a strong state presence in the economy. So speculative finance and its practices have been brought about by the process of financialization. It as the rise of the importance of financial sector as a source of profits at the cost of the real sector of the economy. And this is a global phenomenon that started in the United States, in Anglo-Saxon countries, and then spread to the rest of the world, Western Europe and then Eastern Europe. One of the main characteristic features inside the financial sector regarding financialization is this intermediation of the banking sector Transformation of bank-based financial system characteristic for continental Europe and Eastern Europe into so-called market-based banking, the definition coined by political economist British Ian Hardy and American Sylvia Maxfield, which means that banks are not anymore engaged in provision of credits to enterprises to such a great degree, while the main purpose of the activities is involvement in risk and short-term market operations, which means that banks borrow from the market and lend to the market, so-called originate to distribute model. And principally the difference between commercial banks and non-bank financial intermediaries, such as investment banks, money market funds, and hedge funds, it has blurred to a great degree. And what happened in Russia, we can see in this figure. This is the main result, one of the main results of this transformation of post-Soviet finance in Russia, is that companies rely mainly on organizations' own funds as a source of funding of the investment activities. So here, while banks correspond for a minor part of the source of investments, 5, 6, 7%, it can vary from year to year. So this is the result of this disintermediation. At the center of this process of the rise of speculative finance is, of course, the instrument of repo. This is the repo instrument is used as a form of lending involving the sale and repurchase of marketable collateral assets at a given time period and price level specified by contract. Repo today is a cornerstone of contemporary finance. And again, everything started with the Anglo-Saxon countries and then spread starting from the 1980s to West European countries and other developed capitalist economies. And then in Russia, where it was introduced first in late 90s, but then reintroduced again in the zeros. So it has been also the cornerstone of the Russian finance today as well. In collateral-based finance, financial intermediaries rely on repo markets for the purpose of short-term liquidity management and leverage trading involving risky speculative strategies for profit maximization. So the role of central banks under such system is completely different. From the lender of last resort, they are transformed into the dealer of last resort. And in Russia, it is for the state-controlled financial institutions, mainly the Central Bank of Russia and state-controlled banks, and of course, the state-controlled Moscow exchange that have actively participated in this transformation. So here on this figure, we have the expanding volume of repo trading in Russia. So by the global crisis, it was a pretty standard story because the crisis 2008, 2009 in Russia started like in the West with the collapse of repo markets, which at that time used equity as the main collateral. Here, the share of equity. But then the Russian path in development of collateralized finance started to diverge greatly because more and more, because in what sense it started to diverge? That it started to rely on collateral supplied by state-controlled companies in form of issuance of equity and bonds. One characteristic feature for Russia is the lack of safe collateral, so-called safe collateral. It's governed than bonds mainly, but like US treasuries. But until recently, there was a lack of such safe collateral of their bonds, state of the bonds. So the Russian financial intermediaries needed to rely on kind of different substitutes for the safe collateral, which brought about instability for financial system. Like during this huge CBR's liquidity expansion, when huge liquidity was provided to the banking sector in Russia, and a great bulk of it was provided for non-market collateral, for principally that was based on, so to say, presumed trust to banks that receive this liquidity, and it had devastating effects for financial stability during 2014-15 currency crisis in Russia. And then during recent years, we have the expansion of the Ministry of Finance that started to provide its liquidity, which we'll show shortly. What I'm talking about, it's mainly exchange-based repo markets, not over-the-counter repo market, which is a different story. This is a very not transparent part of the market. Over-the-counter repo market, it's a kind of with huge transactions and relational development between state-owned banks and state-owned corporations. So maturities on exchange-based repo markets are extremely short. This is short, we can say the main characteristic feature of this finance is short-sightedness. It's overnight money, overnight rates. While maturities on over-the-counter repo markets are generally long. The lack of safe collateral, I already said it. So during the recent years, the issuance of the government bonds, federal government bonds, increased. Trading with equity, stocks, and corporate bonds is mainly on the Moscow exchange, is mainly deals with repo trading mode, like here. So from the market-based transactions, which decreased considerably, the repo trading mode totally dominated during the recent decade. And this is especially visible regarding corporate bond sector also. Most of stocks and bonds that are traded and used as collateral for repo markets, it's companies with state participation, like here for equity, and for ruble-denominated corporate bonds here also. So this tendency is quite visible in what direction it moved. So as I said previously, the provision of liquidity by the central bank that was in the mid 2010 years was reversed by provision of huge liquidity up to 10 trillion ruble by the Ministry of Finance, which is not transformed into credits, but instead is left on accounts of corporations, mainly state-owned corporations, and banks on bank accounts. So this accumulated liquidity is channeled to a great degree to repo markets for the purpose of principally for profit maximizing purposes. So state authorities engage actively in this system as well. Like we see here, the Federal Treasury, and that also has unused budget funds that are channeled into repo markets directly or goes to deposits in banks, use that interbudgetary loans. So here the comparison between available funds in bank accounts of privately owned companies and in bank accounts of companies with state participation. We see here that the state-controlled companies dominate in this respect. Here is trading modes of repo transactions with securities. And here we see a great transformation during the recent 6 years, 7 years. It's the rise of repo with the central counterparties, which is innovation copied from Western markets. What is the real innovation that, yes, when the state actually, or the central counterparty, or national clearing center controlled by the Moscow Stock Exchange undertakes the main risks or counterparty risks in the market, unlike during the previous years, which of course brings about increased stability to the entire system. but has its own issues regarding what kind of collateral is accepted by the central counterparty. And the real financial innovation we see here, it's the rise of repo with the general collateral certificates, which means securitization of repo markets. And this is a unique feature for Russia. You cannot still find this instrument that is issued by the Russian central counterparty. There is no analogous example that exists in other financial markets, which means that within the system of repo markets, general collateral certificates are transformed into a kind of quasi money that brings about extreme high liquidity to this market, which enables to channel and rechannel huge amount, trillions of rubles between involved counterparties, including state-controlled companies, banks first and foremost, of course, but also increasingly non-financial companies that indirectly participate in the market, and state authorities, mainly the Federal Treasury. The right issue, of course, so the entire stability of the system depends now on the quality of the collateral. And for example, we see that the number of defaults of corporate bond issues increased during the late zeros, but still the system shows, until now at least, a greater degree of stability, absolutely, unlike in previous years. The main conclusion that we arrived to is that today we see existence of a self-supporting system of capital markets when an area of domestic securities circulates through a repo mechanism underpinning liquidity flows between government agencies, the CBR, central bank, state-controlled banks and corporations, and the remaining private economic agents. At the center, there is a huge electronic platform created by Moscow Stock Exchange, which is positioned at the center of this complicated system of liquidity flows. And the accumulation, the main probably conclusion, the accumulation of excessive liquidity within the financial sector, which we prefer to define as a monetary overhang, testifies to a systemic failure of the Russian economy to transform this liquidity into credit. So monetary transmission mechanism of capital into investment is broken. Banks prefer to channel state-originated liquidity into financial transaction in collateralized markets instead of provide credits to enterprises. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Viktorov, for a very insightful presentation on the issue of finance in Russia, state finance in Russia. Do we have any questions? Well, then I'll ask a brief question. Professor Viktorov, how do you project this system might develop in the future? Do you expect to see more state presence in financial markets in the coming years, or less state presence, or perhaps there will be a completely different trajectory?
I think that the system of state capitalism that arose in Russia, it will continue to sustain absolutely with the domination of the state-controlled actors, no question. So the main issue at stake is whether the Russian state will manage to channel this huge liquidity into investments and create economic growth. That's the main interesting question that there is still no answer, available answer. And I believe personally that until the old-fashioned relational banking is restored, such rechannel will not be possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. And then if we don't have other questions, then we will move to our next speaker, which I'm pleased to present. And next we have Professor Iwasaki, Doctor of Economics and Professor at the Institute of Economic Research, Hitotsubashi University in Tokyo, Japan. Professor Iwasaki, floor is yours. And,
please allow me to share my slides on the screen.
Yes, Professor Viktorov, could you close your slides, please? We can't hear you. You're muted now, sorry.
Sorry, I cannot find it here. Maybe I need to log off and
no. You just need to go down your screen, and then you will see a section, a button, share screen. You press on it, and you press stop share.
Yes, and that is what I cannot find it. I'm sorry.
Maybe because you're in a full screen mode. You just need.
No, I'm not in a full screen mode. I'm sorry, but
simply you should turn off the.
I will log out and then log in directly. So I hope you will not see it anymore. Excuse me.
Okay, I will start.
Okay, yes, please. Sorry, Professor Iwasaki, for this interruption. All right, we can see your slides.
Okay, so Доброе утро, Москва, и добрый день, Азия. Меня зовут Ивасаки, я очень благодарю за ваше приглашение на эту хорошую конференцию. So from now, let me speak in English. And my name is Iwasaki. I am from Hitotsubashi University. So more than 25 years, I studied the Russian economy and transition economies in Eastern Europe, and published some books and journal articles in Japanese, in Russian, and in English. So if you are, and I am mainly study the Russian corporations, focusing on their corporate governance and financial activities and the possibility of bankruptcy or firm failure. But nowadays, I am very interested in the possible negative impact of the ongoing pandemic on the Russian economy. Therefore, I would like to present one new study on this subject. So in this study, I examined the relationship between the economic activities and the COVID-19 pandemic in Russia. So as you know, Russia is one of few countries in the world that has not opted for the policy measure of strong suppression of economic activities in response to the epidemic disaster caused by the new coronavirus. It is really there is a sharp contrast that in Japan and in the United States, the governments strongly suppressed economic activities to prevent the infection from the coronavirus, but Russia is not. So therefore, Russia provides a valuable opportunity to investigate the relationship between economic activities and the spread of the virus. So in this study, I aim to empirically examine to what extent economic activities have an effect on the spread of COVID-19 infection in this country. So to this end, I estimate a system GMM dynamic model using monthly and quarterly panel data of Russian regions. So I would like to talk a little bit about the Russian economy under the ongoing pandemic crisis. So contrary to pessimistic projections by the IMF and the Ministry of Economic Development of Russian Federation in June 2020, Russia's real GDP growth rate in 2020 is minus 3.0%. It is much smaller than the recession triggered by the global financial crisis in 2009. It was minus 7.8%. This unexpectedly favorable macroeconomic performance in Russia is not a result of the relatively minor damage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, but the state policy of not strongly restraining economic activities to prevent infection. So therefore, it is likely that economic activities has greatly accelerated the spread of COVID-19 infection in 4 federations and regions. I would like to examine this hypothesis. So this figure shows you the regional distribution of COVID-19 infection rates and industrial production performance in Russian Federation. And the left figure shows you the regional distribution of number of infected persons. And the right is regional distribution of the industrial production growth rate in 2020. As you see, in Russia, in the northwest regions and in Siberian region, the number of infected persons is higher than in other regions. At the same time, as the right figure shows you, the regions in central part and in the Caucasus part enjoyed much higher growth rate, industrial production growth rate. It means that there is no clear correlation between two from these figures. Furthermore, I estimated the correlation coefficient between number of cases of COVID-19 infection and economic performances, not only using industrial production, but also agricultural production, fixed capital investment, housing construction, registered number of job offers. But as you see, there is no clear correlation as we expected. They are really insignificant. In sum, overall, we cannot find a close relationship between economic performance and COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 in Russian regions. Why? So we should consider 4 factors in order to examine the effect of economic activities on COVID-19 infection. So first is region level fixed effect, including age structure and density of population, social infrastructure, geographical conditions, and so forth. Second is the endogeneity between economic activities and COVID-19 infection. And the third is state dependency of COVID-19 infection. And lastly, the fourth is time lag effect of economic activity on new coronavirus infection. So to deal with these 4 factors, I estimate a system GMM dynamic model using monthly and quarterly panel data of Russian regions for the period from March 2020 to April 2021. So basic model to be estimated is as follows. It is called model type A. Here, Y is COVID-19 infection rate, X is seasonally adjusted growth rate of economic activity. And I also control for the fixed effect of Russian regions. So taking account of the possibility of various time lag structure, I also estimate model type B, which incorporate lagged 3-month moving average of economic activities, and model type C, which takes not only 1 month lagged economic activity, but also 2 months lagged, 3 months lagged economic activity all together. To estimate these 3 models, I use system GMM estimator. And as a proxy of economic activities, 11 variables from industrial production to number of job offers are employed, in addition to the self-isolation index developed by the Yandex Corporation. So this is a list of variables used in empirical analysis. As you see, I use not only industrial production, but also construction volume, retail sales, service sales, wage, employment, market entry rate, market exit rate, agricultural production, monetary income, a number of job offers, which are available either in monthly or in quarterly. So this is a part of estimation results. So please look at here, estimation results using industrial production. As you see, the one period lagged variable of industrial production shows a statistically significant and positive estimate. And the 3 period moving average also exhibited a statistically significant positive. And 1 period, 2 period, 3 lagged variables are also demonstrated a significant and positive estimate. It means that industrial production, which is seasonally adjusted, positively correlated with the COVID-19 infection rate in Russian regions. In contrast, if we look at construction volume, this variable does not show any statistically significant estimate. It means that there is no clear or statistically significant correlation between construction activity and COVID-19 infection rate. Retail sales also show a positive estimate in 3 types of models, and the estimate effect size of retail sales is much larger than that of industrial production. It is really interesting result. With regard to the self-isolation index, the 3-year moving average and 2-period lagged, 3-period lagged variables show a statistically significant negative estimate. So in line with our expectations. Among the quarterly variables, the monetary income showed a positive impact on the COVID-19 infection rate. So this is a summary of estimation results using all economic performance variables. In addition to industrial production and retail sales, I also found that service sales market entry demonstrated a very robust and significantly positive estimate on COVID-19 infection rate in Russian regions. I also estimate the same 3 models by region group. Here, the 8 federal districts are classified into 4 groups, and I estimated in the same way. As you see, the pattern of statistically significant estimates are different across these 4 region groups. At the same time, we found that the impact of retail sales, service sales are homogeneously affect the COVID-19 infection rate beyond the difference in regions. It means that the retail and service industries are main source to spread the COVID-19 infection among Russian citizens in regions. So what I found from this study, so the results strongly supported my prediction that economic activities that involve many peoples and those that simulated more consumption and social activity of citizens have a greater impact on the level of coronavirus infection. It is also found that the time lag between economic activities and the spread of coronavirus varies significantly depending on the type and mode of economic activities. In addition, I revealed that the pathways and intensity of economic activities and spread of coronaviruses could differ greatly among Russian regions. So these results have an important policy implication for current and future epidemic control in Russia and in the world. So, спасибо большое за ваше внимание. Это все.
Большое спасибо, профессор Ивасаки. Thank you very much for your insight into maybe my colleagues who follow this issue know much more, but for me it was very interesting to understand what is happening here, since you know more than we ourselves. Do we have any questions for Professor Iwasaki? Yes, please.
Yes, I have one question to Professor Iwasaki, because did you take into account that different Russian regions undertook different anti-COVID measures during the pandemic, especially at the beginning in spring and summer 2020?
Well, in the models, I didn't control for such how can I say, epidemic measures in Russian regions. But it is true. But I'd like to stress, and many of Russian experts know that Russian government, not only in the central level, but in the region level, the most government did not take strong measures to restrain the economic activities to prevent the infection. It is true. And even I controlled for some anti-infection measures using a dummy variable, which specify 1-2 regions to take such measures. It is not insignificant. Therefore, this time I showed you the very simple estimation result. Thank you. But anyway, I really thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? If I may, I would like to ask a brief question. In your opinion, the fact that Russian government didn't impose strict anti-COVID measures will have a more positive impact on economic growth in the long run, or it's not that important? Just your opinion.
Well, so I think the federal government paid great attention to the secure of quality of life among Russian citizens. So of course, to prevent the infection is an important policy measure, but at the same time, to keep the economic activities in Russia is also has a great impact on the quality of life of Russian citizens. Therefore, it is really understandable that the Russian Federation, how can I say, put first priority to keep economic activities. But maybe the history will tell us which measure is correct or which measure is not. So this is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Iwasaki. And if we don't have other questions, then we will proceed to our next speaker from Korea, Professor Bong-Chul Kim, the director of Institute of EU Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies in Seoul. And Professor Kim will be presenting about another very exciting topic, which is the Arctic development of the Arctic area. Professor Kim, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Irina. Hello, everyone. My name is Bong-Chul Kim from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, Seoul, Korea. Yes, Russia is the very related to the Arctic region. So even though I'm not familiar with the Arctic area, but I choose these topics. Several years ago, I visited the Murmansk, the Russian city. It is the biggest city in the Arctic area. And I realized that about 100 years ago, this city was established. And then now, this city may make another opportunity for the economic cooperation and also international cooperation as well. So yeah, as a Korean, I want to talk about the some clues to make the cooperation area between Russia and Korea, and also my field is the international economic law. So I want to talk about the more focusing on the legal issue. The main purpose of my topic is quite simple. How can you make the legal infrastructure for the cooperation between Korea and Russia? So yeah, even though Russia and Korea, two countries, have the many legal foundation for their cooperation, we can make the further detailed legal tools for their future cooperation. Then that should be very nice for the two countries. Okay, let me briefly explain about the Arctic region. I mean, yes, in this room, some of the professors and academics are more familiar with the Arctic region than me. But for the explanation of the further issues, we can define the Arctic region. Yes, surrounding the North Pole, yeah, some geographical boundaries, we can call that Arctic Circle, yeah, to be a Arctic region. Mainly, Arctic oceans cover this area, and some territories of the related states, such as Russia, yes, Canada, United States, Denmark, Iceland, and Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Yeah, about 100 years ago, just after the First World War, Arctic regions became the one of a hot area to settle down their dispute. So yeah, international society tried to make the many international law for that issue. So yes, in the international society, we could control or regulate many international dispute and the issues in the Arctic region, but yeah, still some areas or some issues are still not controlled. Yeah, and it can be some part of the clues of the dispute. So yeah, let me briefly explain about the international laws regarding Arctic regions. United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea. This is the fundamental rules to the Arctic Ocean mainly. Yes, it can be used for the some international legal issues on the Arctic Sea area. But this international law is not made for the Arctic region. This is the general rules for the law of sea. So even if it can used for that issues, but it is not specific law for the Arctic area. In 1920, yeah, just the First World War, the Svalbard area, that is the series of the island in the Arctic oceans. So the Svalbard Treaty could be used for the dispute of the countries regarding the territorial issues. Nowadays, under this international law, the Svalbard Islands are used for the peaceful purpose, even if the economic benefit. Yes, recently, many international law was made for the Arctic issues. Yeah, the SAR agreement and the agreement on the cooperation, marine oil pollution issues. Yeah. So recent days, some Arctic related country, even non-Arctic related countries such as Korea, they are very interested to establish those kind of international law regarding Arctic region. It's not just for the Arctic region. It's also related to the whole international societies. Yeah, I don't want to talk about the details of the international law on this issue. So just please watch the international law. Yeah, we have some international laws for the Arctic region. Okay, let me jump on to the another point: Russia and Korea in the Arctic regions. Yeah, the Russia is the major country which is related to the Arctic region. So the Arctic area, this area is very important to the Russia, not just for the economic benefit, but also political benefit as well. And also, many Russian peoples are living in the Arctic area. Therefore, yeah, it's not just for the political issues, not just economic issues, but it's also related to the our living standard and the other things. Russian government, yes, they have the many interests in the Arctic regions. Yeah, especially in the climate changes and the economic development and scientific research. Yeah, there are lots of dimensions to make the attraction to the Russian government. So recently, Russian government are using lots of the strategic planning document for their benefit. The issues to Russia are here: Arctic waters, yes, Northern Sea route. We call that issues as the NSR issues. This is very important for the Russia. Yeah, recently China and many Asian countries, yeah, they are very interested in these NSR issues because they believe that this route can shorten the route to link to the European area from Northeast Asia, and also they'll cut down the expenditures to move their product from this area to that area. Natural resource, yes, is definitely important. And then, yeah, recently, Russian government wants to, in some point of the militarization in this area, and this may make the impact to the other countries. So it's also important issues to Russia. Yes, this year, yeah, Russian government became the chairman of the Arctic Council. Arctic Council is the intergovernmental groups for the state in the Arctic area. So from this year to 2 years, yeah, Russia, they can chairmanship. Yeah, they have the chairmanship in the Arctic Council. That means Russia can lead the opinions in the international societies regarding the Arctic region. Yeah, Russian government, yeah, they revealed the basic policy regarding Arctic regions. They call the basic principles of Russian Federation state policy in the Arctic to 2000. 35. So until the future, 15 years later, for during that time, Russian Federation, they will do those kind of activities under this policy. So let's skip the details of the policy. Okay, let's move on to the Korea. As we may know, the Korea is non-Arctic area, but recently Korea they started to have interest in the Arctic regions. They joined to the Svalbard Treaty in 2012, and then they became the observer, of the Arctic Council in the 2013. Then recently, Korean government they are using the policies on the Arctic activity, and they want to be one of the main players in the international societies regarding Arctic issue. So that means Korea and the Russia, they can make the good partnership on the cooperation in the Arctic issue. This is their strategy, Korean government strategy regarding Arctic region. So let's hear about the details of the these strategic issues. That is the my opinion. The main frame of my opinion is quite simple. Russia and Korea, they can make the legal tools for the better cooperation regarding Arctic issues. Not just for the economic issues, but also political issues as well. I don't want to talk about why they have to make the cooperation. That should be a kind of assignment for the policymakers or the politician. As a lawyer, I want to make the my opinions based on the legal issues. Recently, since 2000, Russia and Korea, two governments has made lots of legal infrastructures for their cooperation. This is just the legal bilateral agreement between Russia and Korea only for the economic cooperation. So that means they have many other bilateral agreements. So when we see the titles of the agreement, yes, we can assume that two countries, they have many interests in the varieties of the interest. Yes, it's time to make the another point of legal foundation. Even though the two countries have the many bilateral rules, the point is that regarding the combination of economic benefit and political benefit and the other benefit of the other field to combine together, we need more combined legal tools for the cooperation. The former bilateral agreements are more focused on the certain narrow issues. So we can make the fundamental legal foundation for the cooperation more combined, more complex issues on the Arctic area. Recently, Russia and Korea, two countries are under the negotiations for the FTA. So these preferential economic agreement can be a kind of tips or the legal foundations for that the cooperation in Arctic region. When we make the Korea-Russian FTAs, especially regarding the Arctic region issues, the cooperation, we have to consider the sustainability issue. This is quite emerging issues in the FTA boundaries. This is the new trend of recent FTAs. So many countries are using these concepts, sustainability. So we can call that sustainable economic development, sustainable economic cooperation, sustainable cooperation for the movement of people, sustainable cooperation for the scientific research cooperation, something like that. So even though Russia-Korea FTA is mainly focused on the economic cooperation, but yes, we can make the cooperation on the Arctic regions under the name of sustainability. Then we can see the economic benefit and also the future generation. Then we can touch the climate change issues and the natural the protection of nature issues as well. And then the scientific research cooperation can be done under these legal infrastructure as well. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim Bong-chul. And it was very insightful in what is happening in Arctic in terms of legal issues, which is quite important for development of this region in the future. So do we have any questions? Yes, I see that Kumiko Haba, yes, if I'm pronouncing correctly, has a question. Please, Professor Haba, floor is yours. You're muted now. Can you switch on your microphone? Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Professor Kim. It is so much interesting about your presentation. And as you know, the European Union has set out 3 major policies for the Arctic Ocean region. In the 3 main area is climate change, as you said, sustainable development, and international cooperation. EU policies are being promoted primarily as a Green Deal policy in the international law. So what kind of attitude does South Korea take midst between these EU countries and Russian policies? South Korea is trying to promote economic cooperation with both Russia and the European Union, FTA. So what specific cooperation do you insist on the cooperation with the European Union in the Arctic Ocean region? Is it different from cooperation with Russia? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. That is very complicated things. Yes, one country may make a different attitude to the different partners. So to Korea, as the first FTA countries to the European Union, yes, Korea and the European Union, they have expanded their economic partnership for the 10 years since Korea-EU FTAs. And recently, they started to use the real sustainable economic cooperation. Regarding the Arctic regions, yes, of course, under the EU policy regarding Arctic area, Korea must harmonize with the European policies as well. Therefore, they tried to reduce the many harmful part for their production. and they try to use the more climate and the nature harmonized, friendly, eco-friendly product. And also, Russian side, yes. The main industry of Russia regarding Arctic region for the future cooperation to Korea is natural resource development. That is directly related to the protection of nature. So many countries tried to say that not to develop the Arctic region to preserve, to protect the nature in Arctic area. But many oil produced countries such as Norway and Russia, it is very hard to receive 100% of their opinion. Therefore, these countries, oil product and the natural resource producing countries such as Norway and Russia, of course, Canada altogether and United States, of course, they want to follow sustainable development. It is very difficult to define what is the sustainable development, but we can say that in the here, harmonizable development of economic benefit and the protection of nature. Yes, I know that it is very difficult to harmonize together. And we know that there's a lot of very negative research during the economic development, natural resource development in the Arctic area. However, international society, if they prefer to use the sustainable concept and European Union as well, then Russia and the international society, many other Arctic region who wants to develop their natural resource, they must follow the concept. So if we want to make the legal foundation, then we must, it's not, I think that is my opinion, individual opinion. It is not optional. It is it's kind of obligation to make sustainable the concept. So therefore, I want to say that if Korea and Russia want, if they make the FTA, then they must consider the impact of the issues of the sustainability concept.
Okay, great.
Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim and Professor Haba. And I think it's time to move on to our next speaker. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nikita Stepanov, a senior research fellow at the Institute of Economics here in Moscow, and with his presentation we still remain in Arctic, so hope you don't get cold. So please, Professor Stepanov, floor is yours. Professor Stepanov. Никита Сергеевич, сейчас ваша очередь.
Just one moment. Hello, hello everybody. I also have a small report about the Arctic, and I think it will be interesting to continue this term. So the sea road through the Arctic waters is the shortest water road from the North Europe to the Far East. This road is called the North Sea Road, and has been actively developed by Russia as an alternative to longer sea communication going around the Africa or the Suez Channel. It's for the purpose of the development of the new North Sea Road in Russia that a program for the construction of an ice-breaking fleet and ice glass cargo ships has been adopted and is being implemented. With a total length of the Arctic coastline of about 39,000 kilometers and near 22,500 kilometers of them fall on the territory of Russia. Approximately 70% of domestic hydrocarbon reserves are located in the Arctic continental shelf. In addition, the North Sea Road can serve as a transport artery connecting Western Europe with the Pacific coast of Asia through the Russian territory and ports. Since 2004, Russia has shared borders with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization member countries, not only on the mainland, but also in the Arctic waters. This was the result of the explanation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization East with the admission of Poland and Baltic states to the alliance. In the resource, Russia has taken measures to strengthen its western borders, including the Arctic ones. The geographical factor has a huge impact on the Russian approach to the Arctic. Part of the land territory of Russia is located in the polar latitudes. The entire Eurasian coast of the Arctic Ocean from the western borders of Russia belongs to it. And in addition, Russia has managed to stake out all the islands in the Arctic Ocean located between its mainland coast and the North Pole. Accordingly, a significant part of the water area of the Arctic Ocean is Russian territorial waters, through which the North Sea Road mainly passes. At the same time, the almost untouched Arctic natural resources are an important component of the Russian resource base. And now Russia has adopted and is implementing a program for the accelerated development of the Arctic region. So the very important question, the impact of global warming in the Arctic on the legal aspect. The production of the ice cover in the Arctic may also lead to the fact that the traditional roads of the North Sea Road, now passing through the international sea waters, the territory sea and the exclusive economic zone of the Russian Federation, will become more high latitude. If this happens, the North Sea Road will completely run through the waters of the open sea. That is, will be located outside the zone of the sovereignty and jurisdiction of Russian Federation. In this case, the Russia will no longer have any legal authority to control navigation, and the North Sea Road may turn from the category of the national transport artery under its control into the international shipping road. There will be no longer be a need for mandatory provision of icebreaking and pilotage by Russia. The regulation of navigation will be carried out by the International Maritime Organization and regulated by the relevant international conventions. Such a scenario, of course, is still unlikely since climate changes are not mostly likely cyclical, but it cannot be completely ignored. The intensity of the shipping in the Arctic waters has been growing in the recent years. Therefore, this issue requires very careful study. So far, agreements have been reached on the need for all countries to comply with the provision of the Polar Code, which entered into the force in 2017. However, when it comes to the passage of the ships and caravans through the North Sea Road, Russia insists on its interpretation. So what is the international agenda? That despite the serious deterioration of Russia's relation with the West as a whole, the Arctic is a platform for the level of tension between NATO and Russia is significantly lower than in other regions. But at the same time, there are processes due to global changes in the geopolitical balance of power and the general warming of the climate. Under this condition, the Arctic is becoming an increasingly attractive place for this subject of international politics, who previously practically did not pay their attention to the far north and are geographically quite far away. Over the past 8 years, most non-Arctic countries have updated their strategic plans and developed documents related to penetration into the Arctic and consolidation in this region, which was not observed before. For example, People's Republic of China is most attractive in this field. In 2018, for the first time in the 1,000 years history of China, a white paper was approved in this country, entirely developed to the Arctic policy and strategy of the China. The China managed to become one of the observed countries of the Arctic Council, where apart from the China, only 12 states geographically adjacent to the Arctic region and admitted. This was a serious success of the Chinese diplomatic. China's actively in the Arctic region is of serious concern of all Arctic countries, including Russia, even despite the political rapprochement with China, which has occurred in the recent years against the background of the deterioration relation with the West. So, what is the international cooperation in the Arctic? Energy projects are the most attractive for the foreign investment. Russia intends to maintain a policy of attracting foreign investors, but due to the introduction of the sanction, it has begun to reorient itself to the Asian investors. Also, so far, it has managed to attract not so much funds from there. The adopted law on the benefits in the Arctic should provide incentive for the geological exploration and production of the hydrocarbon in the region. It should be noted that the share of domestic investments in the modernization of Arctic zone in the total investment volume does not exceed 20%. So the most successful international project in the Arctic can be called Yamal liquefied natural gas. They consist of an liquefied natural gas production plant with a capacity of about 16.5 million tons per year on the basis of the Yuzhno-Tambinsk gas condensate field, whose gas reserves are estimated at 926 million meter cubic, and the Sabeta seaport for loading production on liquefied natural gas tankers. Yamal liquefied natural gas is a joint venture, and it consists of gas oil company Novatek. It has about more than 50% of shares. Also, French gas oil company Total has 20%. Also, Chinese gas oil company CNPC has also 20%, and the Silk Road Fund of Initiative BRI has less than 10% of shares. It was nothing that quite a lot of international projects are being carried out in the Arctic in the field of climate, environment studies, the biological environment and of the Arctic Ocean, mineral exploration, ecology, and others. China, South Korea, and Japan are trying to coordinate their activities in the Arctic at a high level. None of the non-Arctic power will be able to realize their ambitions in the Arctic. The Arctic Council will remain the main platform for the discussion issues of cooperation and coordination of position of the polar 8 states. So, and what does Russia expect from the Arctic? For Russia, the North Sea Road can become a significant source of economic growth. Shipping companies and supporters of increasing staff in the region point to the significant cost saving on the ship sailing along the North Sea Road and predict a rapid growth of Arctic traffic. The tonnage of bulk carriers has increased tenfold from the 3 million ton in 2006 to more than 30 million ton by 2021. And the volume of oil and gas is expected to grow similarly to 40 million tons per year by the end of the decade. The North Sea Road can also benefit from Russian oil and gas development in the Arctic. As a permafrost throws in the tundra, the construction of pipelines and railways will become an increasingly important task, and hydrocarbon resources can be exported more and more through the North Sea Road. In addition, 20% of the planet's natural resources are located in the Arctic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stepanov. Do we have any questions? Well, I would like to ask a brief question. We heard about Korea's intentions to not co-develop, but somehow participate in the development of Arctic and perhaps in Russia's Arctic projects. What is your take on this? Do we have many opportunities for Russia-Korea coordination in the Arctic region, or perhaps you may see certain problems for this and obstacles?
I think that, of course, there is some problems to coordinate with non-Arctic countries in the Arctic, because there are a lot of problems between the members of Arctic Council of the 8 states of Arctic countries. None decided many problems of the view on the Arctic project, because the Russia and the Canada have one point of view about the territorial problems in Arctic, and other states had another view. And that's why only when these 8 countries decided all the problems, and other countries of Asia or other non-Arctic countries can involve in this problem of the development of Arctic, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Stepanov. Do we have other questions? Yes, Professor Haber, please.
Yes. Sorry, a very brief question. Thank you very much, Professor Nikita Stepanov. I'd like to ask you about the Chinese policy. As you said, China is very interested in the Arctic Ocean and is considering the Arctic Ocean as a third route after the Belt and Road Initiative. Is Russia welcome to such a Chinese policy or not? And why you think about that? Thank you very much.
I told, first of all, Russian non-support Chinese policy in the Arctic, because I told that there is a lot of problems between 8 Arctic countries, and they not are decided. And we have some projects with China in the Arctic, for example, ecology programs to study the Arctic Ocean, environment of the Arctic Ocean. But we have a different opinion of the territorial problems in the Arctic. That's why we don't support Chinese strategy in the Arctic, because they're very different of ours, of Russian position.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think we can move on to our next speaker. Thank you again, Professor Stepanov. And if we have remaining questions, we will be able to ask them during the Q&A session. And our next speaker is actually from China, Professor Hailin Ye, who is also a Deputy Director at the Bureau of International Cooperation at CIS in Beijing, China, and he will take us to Central and South Asia and will present about importance of China and Russia coordination in this region. Professor Ye, floor is yours.
Thank you, Irina. It's my great pleasure to have the chance to meet all of you online. It's unfortunately due to the pandemic, we can't have the meeting in person, but discussion and share some thoughts online is still very useful and thoughtful. Yes, I came from China, but I would like to share my thought on another common neighboring country of us, I mean, Afghanistan, because we, a couple of months before when we settled the presentation topic during this conference, my suggestion is that we would like to find the most popular issue. As at that time, Afghanistan is the most popular issue, but now it seems the situation is coming down. So probably I will share something not very interested, and especially I hear all the other speakers, presenters, they are focusing on mainly East Asia, but I will shift from East Asia to Central Asia and South Asia. You know, if we go back to 2 months before this, when the Taliban win the war, in another saying, there's the American take the 20 years to make the regime change from Taliban to Taliban. And at that time, there's when American withdraw all the forces from Afghanistan and Taliban take the power, everybody think what's the implementation from this so-called Taliban's victory over Afghanistan and to our region, not only to this country. And start from this, I think we should explore why Taliban win and what's the major lesson American after 20 years war, what are Americans, the most important lessons given by American. I think if we are talking about Taliban, how Taliban win this long-term war, basically Taliban take the lessons from the past history, majorly 2. One is that Taliban realized that Taliban couldn't set up any regime. There's a solo domination by domination by Taliban themselves. They had to share some interest in rights and power with another ethnic groups, including Hazaras, including Tajik and Uzbeks. So that's the first and foremost lesson Taliban learned compared with the 20 years before, at the time when American set up the alliance with the Northern Alliance and the top-down Taliban regime. This time, when we see in the 45 days when Taliban took the power, basically there's no any severe bloody conflicts in anywhere. Taliban just smash off all the forces, all the resistance forces, including the Panjshir Valley. So I think that's not because of Taliban's capacity in the combat is really great or improved much. It's because of this political and diplomatic or negotiation skill improved much. So he consolidate and negotiate with most of the local forces and reach the deal with them. So that's the reason why Taliban win so quick. Secondly, Taliban also realized the international recognition and the international support are necessary for them. So this time, when Taliban take the Kabul, we see there's much differences. Yes, we may argue that such kind of face Taliban show to the world is only for show. Doesn't mean Taliban already has the nature, it has some fundamental change in nature, but at least they know they have to show some evidence to convince the world that they are changed. So that's the second lesson. For these 2 lessons, in my personal opinion, now Taliban is not only the religion's fundamentalism group, but also a military group fighting for power. So more realistic compared with 20 years before. This for Taliban. And also it's called kind of the alliance with the Afghanistan reality, you know, the ethnic background, the ethnic come from left behind, much left behind the economic situation and the corruption government in Kabul and so on. We can read a lot. And on the other hand, when we're talking about why America lost the war, I think there's also many lessons, and some lessons are very inspiring for the other regional players, including Russia and China. Firstly, America doesn't have any clear agenda in Afghanistan. When they invade Afghanistan, they want to revenge for the September 11th. And then very quick, because they win this victory very quick, they want to reshape this country, rebuild the nation. And then they want to just kill bin Laden and try to keep Taliban away from the so-called mainstream government. And then they make the compromise. They want to save their soldiers and the resources. And after 20 years, they gone. So for the last 20 years, America doesn't show any clear picture. What they want from Afghanistan, this also always a question. Secondly, American want to, of course, we had to admit another issue that American also want to make Afghanistan as a so-called infiltration base to interfere the Central and the South Asia issues. So this more broad pictures, but it still doesn't work because they can't stabilize Afghanistan themselves. So nothing happened since the 2006. I mean, first round of the color revolution in Central Asia. And from there on, basically, America needed support from Central Asia, not try to manipulate the situation in Central Asia. It's quite different. So America need to learn their lesson, but all the regional players also need to learn the lesson that we should realize the Taliban and Afghanistan is quite a, we can't say the tomb of the empire is tomb yard of empire. I won't say that. I don't think that's the truth, but we should notice that every superpower, if we want to go into Afghanistan, we should know the purpose and remember this purpose, because there are so many superpowers. When they come to Afghanistan with one purpose, when they stay there, they set up another purpose. And then when they go, they forgot all of them. So that's the quite, I think that's a major license for any superpower, including China and Russia, because American can go back home, at least they are thousands of miles away from Afghanistan. But unfortunately, we are the neighbors, we had to stay. So anyone we stay with Afghanistan, we had to clearly has the image that what we want from them, how we can deal with them. So that's the quite important issue for all of us. And now we're facing a new regime, new administration, so-called the return of the Taliban, the Islamic Emirates. In Afghanistan, Islamic Emirates, they return to Kabul. So what's the new policy or tendency of Taliban? I think there's three major aspects we should know there. They have some change. One is that they try to share some power with the Northern Alliance. Secondly, they want to try to adopt a little, at least the minimal size of the moderate policy, including their attitude towards the female. But of course, they won't have the fundamental change. And thirdly, they want to set up an acceptable diplomatic relationship with the foreign countries, including the regional players. But we should notice the one important thing that the Afghanistan, the Taliban, they in this round of the regime, this round of their ruling, is not based on their military victory. It's based on their negotiation skill. So they had to share a lot of things and make so many compromises. So no matter their domestic political system, or their ethnic or female policy, or even including their diplomatic policy, they had to make the compromise with the local grassroots forces. And such kind of the grassroots forces, they don't care about Afghanistan. They only care about their village, their valley, their community, and their province. So we can see Taliban want to change, but with the time passing by, I have a very pessimistic perception that the Taliban will little slow down their change and then go back to their so-called normal status, because they had to make so many compromise with their local grassroots supporters. So that's the possible the tendency of Taliban in the aspect of their domestic policy, and so such kind of the situation not only make the Taliban in such kind of the dilemma, but also caused the challenge of the regional players that we want to encourage Taliban to have more progress, to make more progress related to the social issue or the economy issue or diplomatic issue. But also we need to be aware that then the danger of the Taliban go back to the old school of thought. So how we addressed it? There's three possibilities or three solutions. One is that we can raise the sanction towards them. Unless you make the change, otherwise we won't provide any financial support to you. This is the Americans' way. Or we just can't give the money to them to buy their compromise. This is the solve this and UAE's way. I think these two solutions, neither of them will work. For Americans, that we should remember 20 years before, when Americans raised the sanction, including the whole international community, they raised the sanction towards Taliban, and Taliban still need money. Where they get money? They didn't get any money from any country. They get money from Al Qaeda. They still can find money, but with a different price. Or UAE or Saudis, they can give the money to them with their terms. And such kind of terms, whether Taliban will receive the benefits or ISIS or Daesh will receive the benefits, we can discuss about it. We can have a further discussion. So I think for China and Russia, including all the regional players, Pakistan, Iran, and the Central Asia states, we need to adopt our own regional approach to try to set up a regional policy package towards Taliban, and so to solve the problem or to make some contribution to their national reconciliation process. After all, the war is over, but the national reconciliation process is still going. Taliban is on the way to set up to restore the so-called regime of the Emirates, but it's a long way to go. It's not so easy. In my personal opinion, and I would like to share some thought on what's the common interest and what's the common policy between China and Russia. Firstly, what's the common interest related to Afghanistan and between China and Russia? Firstly, and counterterrorism, of course, that's for natural. But define the terrorism. It's not Taliban, it's Al Qaeda, it's Daesh. It's the so-called the radical elements hiding in Afghanistan and paid by some international groups and try to infiltrate to our own territory to conduct some attacks. So there's one. Anti-drugs, of course, that's also very important, especially for Russia and the Central Asians. And thirdly, to prevent any external players to take the Afghanistan as the infiltration base to conduct the so-called color revolution policy or plot in Central Asia. That's what happened from the 2003 to 2006. And the last one is to ensure our communication routine safety, just like what China and Russia already did in this year in Ningxia autonomous region, which is we call it the joint military zone. That's the four essential interest, common interest. None of them is directly related to the economy or the natural resources explored, but everyone is also related to the social stability in Afghanistan. So the common policy that's not only shouldn't only focusing on one aspect, such as the military or economy. In my personal opinion, that's we should combine the social policy and the economy assistance, and including the military solution. Firstly, we should support the Afghanistan local forces to try to maintain the essential social situation in Afghanistan, not only from the center of the Kabul. Actually, center of the Kabul in the hand of the Taliban or in the hand of the Islamic Republic, there's no big difference. They still have to follow the local issue, just like the people always say that all the politics are local. It not only applied in the United States, but also applied in Afghanistan. And secondly, economy issue. So now some companies, especially some Chinese companies, I would like to confess that they would like to go rush into Afghanistan to make the some big investment project to explore the natural resources, especially their mine resources. In my personal opinion, this is not really a bad idea, because they suddenly very soon they will find out they had to pay a very high price for ensure their security, investment security, personal security, and so on. So now what we should do is to try to encourage the local economy restored. I mean, for the social aspect, to feed the people, to ensure the people have the, to make the business small, not big. That's my second thought. And thirdly, we need to consider the joint military operation towards Afghanistan, but not try to provide some so-called very strong military land forces. It's highly unlikely, but by some air support to eliminate the Daesh or Al-Qaeda is kind of an option for both of the countries. After all, we can notice that one very essential issue is from the last 4 years, no any Daesh elements conduct an attack to America and NATO. They all try to kill Afghanistan government and even the Taliban. So who is the terrorist? That's the very interesting question. So in my, as the conclusion, I would like to say that it's the responsibility for China and Russia to maintain Afghanistan situation, to make this country has a little bit social development, but it's not our burden. We should realize that any country's policy on Afghanistan should and have to have the limited purpose. We are to restore this country or to make this country national reconciliation process complicated. It's beyond our capacity. What we can do is provide assistance, but not do the things for them. So after Afghanis, by Afghanis is still the major principle of all of us. We should remember that. And the last country didn't forget. The last country forget this lesson is the United States, and see what they did, what they get. So that's my conclusion on the situation of Afghanistan. Of course, if we can stabilize the situation in Afghanistan, the Central Asia and the South Asia won't be a big challenge for all of us. So that's all. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor Ye, for touching upon a very important issue. It's important also in view of even of our topic, the 30 years of transition in Russia and post-Soviet countries, because if we remember history of Afghanistan, war in Afghanistan was one of the contributing factors for dissolution of USSR. So situation there and how much we control it is very, very important for Russia, and as you rightly mentioned, for all countries, including China. And I see that we have raised hand. We have a question for you, so please, Valeria Gorbacheva, she is our scientific fellow. Please, Valeria.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Professor Yue, for such striking presentation and raising such important topic for today. I have a very simple question for you, so please share your opinion on what exact practical steps Russia and China need to take to ensure the stability in the region.
Okay. Firstly, I think related to Afghanistan situation, I think China and Russia should try to set up a regional framework to formulate a kind of the regional mechanism for this country. I mean, for at least from the first step, that the diplomatic recognition. I mean, the regional country, including Pakistan, Central Asia states, and Iran, and China and Russia, this country has the special responsibility and the special influence on whether the international community need to recognize the Taliban as a regime or as only as a military forces group. So this is the first step. How we can we need to coordinate, and even we need to take even we can say that we need to have the kind of the consensus or operation towards the Taliban, not only by one country or another country. This is my first suggestion. Secondly, is that about how to deal with the Taliban domestic the Afghanistan domestic security situation also require the regional mechanism. I mean, such kind of the Central Asia states and Iran and Pakistan, they are in the front line of the Afghanistan, and China and Russia has the more strong strengths and the resources can provide support and try to limit the Taliban, or not Taliban, I'm sorry, my fault. Try to control the extremist or the radicalist inside of Afghanistan to prevent such kind of the elements to spread to the central region. So try to set up the two front lines. One is around Afghanistan. Another one is in the China border with certain country and the Russia border with a certain country. I think that's a second suggestion. And thirdly, what we should did is to provide the social assistance. I'm not suggesting that the big companies to go rush into the Afghanistan. I'm suggesting that the social workers and the medical teams, we need to go to some areas to provide our assistance, because now the Afghan people, their living standards is totally disparate. I'm supporting the regional approach. I don't think the Western approach, that means to raise the sanction to threat the Taliban, will work. That's my answer. I hope this can help a little bit helpful for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ye. And I think that we should move to our next speaker, since we are a little bit behind our schedule, and we will have a first discussion during Q&A session. And I'm pleased to present our next speaker from Philippines, Joshua Espena. Sorry if I pronounce not correctly. Joshua is a resident fellow at the International Development and Security Corporation, a policy think tank based in Manila. He also lectures at the Polytechnic University of Philippines, and he will give us his perspective on Russia's presence in East Asia. So Joshua, floor is yours. Maybe you need to unmute yourself because we can't hear you well. Joshua, are you with us? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
For a moment. Okay. Can you see my screen, my PowerPoint now?
No, it's loading.
Okay.
Right, we can see it now.
Okay, so good afternoon from Manila. So I will be presenting my work entitled The Great Bear in the Indo-Pacific, the Russian Navy Today, and the Opportunities and Challenges for Defense Relations with the Philippines. So as shown in my screen, the following points will be discussed in order. We need to understand what Russia's interests are in the Indo-Pacific region. It's about regional security and stability to access the region's prosperity and development. It was not easy for Russia, however, since other great powers have also have stake there. At the end of the Cold War, Moscow had to get its house in order, but its ambitions, although delimited, remained present through its support for multilateral arrangements. With the return of the great power competition since the 2010s, Moscow's interest in the region would have to be considered along the military dimension, specifically the Navy. So as shown on the screen, the Russian Navy is guided by its relevant strategies, concepts, and doctrines. Since 2008, the Russian Armed Force underwent a serious modernization geared into a smaller, maneuverable, high-tech, and professional war fighting organization. This is needed since Russia seeks to consolidate its position as a great power in the multipolar world to defend its values. Moscow sees the need to address the military threats and risks in this multipolarity by developing its economy and fusing civil and military critical spheres on critical technologies. So that desire is also present as it aims to reduce the maritime-based threats in the region. Russia sees the need to defend its coastlines to maintain control over its sovereign waters. Consequently, the Russian Navy would be securing the homeland from possible informational and missile attacks and expanding its blue water operations. So it's part of what Russian Chief of Staff General Valery Gerasimov coins as the active defense.
Joshua, we can't hear you now.
Hello, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we can assess here that the Russian Navy today is between legacy and uncertainty. Like the Soviet Navy, the Russian Navy remains a Corvettian, that is Corvettian fleet that is support role with the ground, air, and air defense forces deployed in near seas rather than a Mahanian one, which aims for strategic control of the blue water seas. Russia's efforts to decommission heavier Soviet legacy fleet and replace it with smaller multi-role vessels for the future while keeping strategic deterrence central to its military strategy can attest to this. Russia most likely will cling to its Soviet image for the Navy while addressing its shipbuilding efforts for some time. So for its force employment, the Indo-Pacific region is likely to be Russia's most important concern in the present. Notably, its Pacific fleet is one of the most powerful fleets today, aside from the Northern Fleet. Just this year, the Pacific fleet just finished its target practice against hypothetical carrier strike groups. This November 2021, the Pacific fleet would be adding its caliber-armed Kilo 2 class submarine, the Magadan. So amidst all these preparations, Russia would remain busy keeping up its Soviet image to shape the environment. Through naval diplomatic visits, Moscow could shape perceptions of its return as a great power. Notably, these vessels are not usually arriving in a fleet, but only one platform, and most of these vessels are Soviet legacy vessels. Now, it's critical to ask this. If the aim is to showcase Russian naval capacity for choosing its defense market reach, particularly in Southeast Asia, my question would be, is sending Soviet legacy vessels our way to go? Such a critical question can be relevant to its defense relations with the Philippines. Since 1976, bilateral relations have been low-key and mostly low politics focused. It would change radically when President Rodrigo Duterte became president in 2016. Since then, bilateral ties have upgraded in many ways, including defense cooperation. In 2017, Russia made a naval diplomatic visit to the port of Manila. It also signed the Memorandum of Understanding for improving defense cooperation in the same year. In 2018 and 2019, both Manila and Moscow had sent their defense and military attachés, respectively, to work on military technical issues. As of April 2021, both capitals expressed great room for cooperation as they celebrated their 45th anniversary of bilateral relations. So there is indeed room for cooperation. First is the possibility of an ASEAN-Russia maritime exercise. It is far from impossible since we already have done it with the Americans in 2018 and the Chinese in 2019. So should this happen, the Russian Navy can learn much about this part of the region, particularly in Southeast Asia, not just in the parts of Vietnam, since it also desires to expand blue water operations. The Philippine Navy, on the other hand, can also witness the quality of Russian-designed naval platforms. Second point would be the possibility of negotiating for a status of visiting forces agreement or SOVPA, just like Manila has with Canberra and Tokyo. It may help both our navies to understand each other, but we must keep in mind its geopolitical sensitivities, since Manila is Washington's ally. What is needed is to define a narrowed objective of this SOVPA, again, for the Russians to know their defense sales customers. Third point would be the technical cooperation to complete the tandem of the Russia-India BrahMos anti-ship missile system. Just this March, Manila has already inked its possible deal to procure BrahMos missiles from New Delhi, but we need the Russians in the equation to truly understand this weapon. Fourth would be the education and training exchange of our naval planners and operators. I argue that both Russian and Philippine navies possess similarities minus strategic deterrence, which is the focus on green water defense along the coastlines. It would allow the Philippines to learn more about the Russian naval platforms. Conversely, that the Russians to understand its potential Filipino client for defense industry. Relatedly, for the last point, Russia needs to offer high-quality naval platforms of defense industries that are more affordable to procure and maintain. In 2018, Philippine Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana once hinted at the possibility to procure diesel-electric Kilo-class attack submarines. But this was soon dismissed since the Defense Department decided to choose between French and South Korean designed submarines. I believe that the Armed Forces of the Philippines Modernization Program will continue beyond its target date of 2028. So I hope that when the time comes, when we need another round of procurement of shopping list, Russia's competitive and affordable assets will be considered. There are also probable points that may hamper the defense relations. First is the enduring strength of our alliance with the US beyond the Duterte presidency. Should Manila and Moscow both proceed to deepening defense ties, it might bring agitation to both China and the US, already competing in this part of the region. And lastly, the adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. That a slow economic performance in the short to medium terms may have implications to both Russian shipbuilding and Philippines defense procurement. So as I end my presentation, the following are my takeaways. First, the question remains if the Russian Navy can become a blue water navy in the Indo-Pacific. Second, this is because its interests in the post-Soviet spaces are likely to remain a priority. Thirdly, we can say that the defense relations between Manila and Moscow remain limited, yet it is not less promising. Lastly, it is dire for Russia to adapt to the new strategic reality of the Indo-Pacific. And as I would say, for my personal opinion, that it would need to decrease, if not abandon, the image of the Soviet legacy, and they would have to do it fast. So my presentation ends here. Thank you so much to the Russian Academy of Sciences for the opportunity to share my thoughts, and also to Dr. Marife Ballesteros of the Philippine Institute of Development Studies. And I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua, for your excellent presentation. And I wonder, do we have any questions I think that I saw a raised hand from Professor Marif Ballesteros. Am I correct?
Hello. Oh, okay.
Hello, yes.
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Joshua, for that very informative discussion and presentation. This is actually the first time I have an expanded discussion on Philippine-Russian relations, especially in terms of cooperation. I just have a simple question. I just want to know if there is already a framework, defense framework, with regards to South China Sea conflict, and how does this Russian-Philippine agreement look at the results of the UNCLOS discussion with regards to the South China Sea arbitration?
Okay, thank you so much for that question, Dr. Ballesteros. So far, the framework of cooperation that I look forward to is the ASEAN-China Code of Conduct of Parties for the South in the South China Sea. However, the Department of Foreign Affairs position, our position in Manila, is according to him, we're still working it out, and accordingly that we have to integrate the role of the extra-regional powers in concluding this framework. So we look forward to the COC to be finalized, and in my view, I think it's going to be a hard time for all stakeholders in the region to conclude it swiftly. So as for the Russians, Moscow have made it clear for so many years now that they invoke neutrality in the South China Sea, and they look forward for the COC to be concluded as much as possible. That's my take, ma'am.
Thank you for that response.
Thank you, ma'am.
Over to you, Irina.
Thank you to you, Marif, and thank you to you, Joshua. I would love to ask my own question, but I think I'll keep it until Q&A since we have still a few more participants to go. But thank you for your presentation. And we move on to our next speaker. And our next speaker is Professor Leonid Vardomsky, a Doctor of Sciences and head of the Center for Post-Soviet Studies here at the Institute of Economics, Russian Academy of Sciences. Professor Vardomsky is with us, but at his request, I will read out his presentation, but in case you have any questions, you will be able to ask Professor Vardomsky directly. Give me a second, I will share slides with you. Oh, sorry, this is not it, this is our program. So our presentation is here, right? So from USSR to the new regionalization of the post-Soviet space. First of all, I would like to mention about two theoretical concepts that this paper is based on. First is the concept of transformation, and the second one is regionalization. Both concepts reflect the ongoing changes. The first one is wider and suggests greater spatial coverage. The second one is associated with the changes occurring as a result of the integration and at the same time disintegration of space. Let's talk about the USSR zone. This is our starting point. The USSR was built on a planned basis and rigidly centralized economic management. The integration of the country's space was carried out through a planned specialization of the Union republics, taking into account natural and climatic conditions, demography, level of development, and geopolitical position. But what is important, it wasn't quite a natural process when these specifications prevailed. But as I mentioned, it was a planned specialization. Union integration was characterized by a sharp predominance in the international ties of the Russian Federation itself, which was its economic basis. Socialist economic integration, despite the centralization of management of each of the CMEA member countries, didn't have a supranational planning and management body. It was organized horizontally. And I would like to mention that failure to timely reform this horizontal organization was one of the reasons for the collapse of the USSR and CMEA. New integration as a reflection of the transformation of the post-Soviet space. When the USSR disintegrated, newly independent states emerged. And it raised the question of the format of their economic interaction under market conditions. In the new Russia, as we say, the idea of the inevitability of reintegration due to the established inter-republican specialization prevailed within the political elite. But this point of view didn't take into account the market transformation, the formation of a new identity in the newly independent states, the interests and influence of third countries. In the 90s and 2000s, there was a search for models of mutual integration adequate to rapidly changing external and internal conditions. Sub-regional projects arose, quite a few of them. We can mention the Customs Union, the Guam, organizations in Central Asia, the Union State. In 2001, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was established. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, a multilateral FTA was formed within the Commonwealth of Independent States, in which 9 countries of the Commonwealth took part. But 3 states at about the same time entered into an association agreement with the EU with the creation of a so-called DCFTA, and 5 member states and 5 states established the Eurasian Economic Union. How did it impact ties between newly independent states? In general, the post-Soviet space in the mid-2000s turned out to be split according to integration priority. Internal ties in it were noticeably weakened. The volume of mutual exports over the past decade has decreased from $113 billion in 2010 to $92 billion in 2020. So we have almost a 20% reduction within a decade. And this is much less than they used to be in 1991, when it stood at $163 billion. And the value of dollars 30 years ago was quite different. The share of Russia in foreign trade for half of the newly independent states doesn't exceed 15%. Now in most countries, the Soviet economic legacy in terms of the production of products with high added value has been lost. The modernization of the economy occurs mainly due to the import of technologies from third countries. And then there is a question of various regional trade agreements that serve as a tool for regionalization of the post-Soviet space. Most of the existing formats of regionalization in which the newly independent states participate are based on the principles of the WTO and have a network structure. The preferential trade agreements include the above-mentioned CIS, FTAs, the Eurasian Economic Union, the DCFTA with the EU, agreements on FTAs concluded by the Eurasian Economic Union with individual countries, and individual post-Soviet countries with each other and with third countries. So we have a wide network of various regional integration agreements. At the beginning of 2021, Ukraine had the largest number of such agreements, 20, and Turkmenistan had the least, only 4. All of such agreements do not imply serious limitation of national sovereignty, which can be the case in other integration projects like the EU. Eurasian Economic Union has a single customs space, but with a number of agreed exceptions and deviations from the general foreign trade policy. The picture by the mega project of the People's Republic of China, Belt and Road, and the Turkic countries of the CIS participate in the Turkic Union, headed by Turkey. The multi-vector nature of foreign economic relations plays a protective role for the participating countries in the turbulence of the world economy. Pardon me. Also, it balances external economic influences on the development of national economies, thereby stabilizing them both from the outside and from within. But the big social impact of integration projects creates a favorable environment for the intensifying the geopolitical struggle in the post-Soviet space. The transformation of the post-Soviet space can take place according to two basic options. The first option is its transformation into a limit trophic zone between Russia, China, Europe, and possibly Turkey. The second option is the formation of a center of the world economy consisting of a number of newly independent states with its parallel inclusion into the Great Eurasian Partnership. The latter option, in my view, ensures greater stability in world development. It is important to build up efforts to economic cohesion of the Eurasian Union countries and interested CIS countries to achieve progressive results in the social sphere. Now, the Eurasian Union countries through horizontal integration, free trade zones which ensure its development in breadth going beyond the post-Soviet space. Post-Soviet integration is being reborn into a truly Eurasian one. The basis for development in breadth is the creation of North-South and West-East. But this is not enough. It is necessary to introduce soft elements of vertical integration of the EAEU in the form of coordination and joint projects, which can ensure its development in depth as well. Thank you for your attention. To Professor Radomski, please feel free to ask these questions. All right, so if we have questions later, perhaps during, or perhaps we have a question. Yes.
Irina, hello.
Yes,
so my
yes.
question would be, supposing that the continuous process of regionalization of post-Soviet states are underway, what do you think would be the possible reactions of NATO and also other regional partners, such as Iran, India, and as well as Japan in the Far East flank?
Thank you, Joshua. Леонид Борисович, вам нужна помощь, да, с вопросом?
Да.
Да, то есть вот, реакция других стран и НАТО на возможную интеграцию продолжающуюся постсоветского пространства по сценарию, который вы описываете.
В моем представлении вариант с формированием пояса лимитрофных государств, находящихся в постоянном хаосе, для НАТО, ну, предпочтительнее, чем формирование некоего центра, состоящего из интегрированных постсоветских стран.
So in my opinion, if there will be of countries that continually exist in chaos, is a preferable option for NATO than to have a coordinated, integrated center with the post-Soviet states. Лен Борисович, еще что-то?
Нет.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was a short answer to your question. So that for NATO, like the first scenario of like lymphotropic belt area with countries living in chaos is more preferable option than coordinated and strong center of integration. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, I have one question. It's I can ask it in Russian also directly.
Yes, sure.
Да, вот такой вопрос. А будут ли элиты постсоветских стран, ну, например, такие сильные, как казахские, заинтересованы делегировать часть своих полномочий центральному органу, который будет, например, основан на основе Евразиатского экономического сообщества, ну, хотя бы до той степени, как это произошло уже на территории ЕС, например. Не будет ли сопротивления со стороны этих сильных региональных элит подобной интеграции?
Могу ответить? Или вы переведете вопрос?
Я могу его задать на английском. I can ask it also in English directly. Will it be kind of resistance of strong regional elites of post-Soviet states, like, for example, in Kazakhstan, to delegate parts of its economic power and political power to the central power that would arise based on Eurasian Economic Community, or at least to the same degree that it has happened in the European Union?
Спасибо за вопрос. Ну, в докладе я пытался донести, что речь о расширении национальных компетенций не идет. И, собственно говоря, в документах, образующих Евразийский союз, там сделан упор на сохранение и укрепление национального суверенитета. То есть в этом смысле модель евразийской интеграции, она скорее похожа на АСЕАН. Вот. Речь идет о том, чтобы усилить координацию развития на межправительственном уровне. То есть, ну, примерно то самое, что было в рамках Совета экономической взаимопомощи. То есть усилить элементы обсуждения перспектив развития, адаптации национальных институтов регулирования экономического развития. И самое главное, перейти от торговли к совместной проектной деятельности. Ну, несколько проектов есть. Это и Евразийский банк, несколько банков, вот, которые созданы в основном Россией и Казахстаном. Это, например, организация, значит, по транспортировке контейнеров из Китая в Европу и наоборот. Ну, сейчас вот, например, создана кооперация в производстве противоковидной вакцины. Вот, и еще, но этого недостаточно, конечно. Нужно расширять совместную проектную деятельность.
Thank you, Professor Radomsky. I'll just briefly recap the answer. So when we look at the documents that Eurasian integration is based on, we can see that it's not as, there is nothing about supranational sovereignty. So countries participating in this integration arrangements do not delegate their national sovereignty. Instead, they fully keep their national sovereignty. So we can't compare Eurasian integration with the EU. It's rather closer to the ASEAN project where there is a loose association of nations that keeps their sovereignty. The main purpose of Eurasian integration is to improve coordination of states for various policy issues. There is a stronger discussion on adaptation of various national institutions for the purposes of shared development. And so it's kind of a track that the member states of USSR and Common Economic Bloc of the former Soviet times was based on. And the main purpose now is to move away from trade-based cooperation to project-centric cooperation. There are a few examples here. First is banks that serve the purposes of Eurasian cooperation. There is a bank set up by Russia, Kazakhstan mainly. Then there is a project to transport containers from China to Europe through the geographic space of Eurasian countries. There are initiatives for anti-COVID vaccine production, but of course there should be more so that the integration project is working. So that was it. Thank you, Professor Vorodomsky. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your questions. And we move on to our next speaker, also from South Korea, Professor Ho-Yoon Jong from Pukyong National University in Busan. And Professor Jung will take us to Russia-Latin America relations. Professor Jung, floor is yours. We can't hear you yet. You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry about that. Hello, my name is Ho-Yoon Jung, and I'm a senior researcher at the Institute for Global and Area Studies at Pukyong National University in South Korea. And let's move to Latin America, which is very unexpected topic in this conference. And my presentation topic is Russia-Latin American relations in the post-Cold War era. And the main purpose of this presentation is to examine Russia's foreign relations other than Asia. In other words, Russia and Latin American relations in the context of post-Cold War era. Actually, I'm not familiar with Russia, frankly speaking. And I don't know much about the Russia or Russian studies, but I've been very interested in Russia because I'm now conducting a research about the perception of Russia and Russia's image in Korean public through analyzing big data, such as social network service and news commentaries, and also YouTube comments. And that was ordered by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm currently receiving funding from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I really wanted to present my work, Russia's image in Korea, here today, but the research results should not be disclosed until the research is completed. So I chose this topic. So this topic is not a completed research, but it's a kind of, it's part of a research process or part of brainstorming. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And let's look at the pre-Cold War and Russia and Latin American relations. And currently, not in the past, but currently, Russia and Latin America share political and economic relations, which are currently marked by Russia's two main interests. First one is geopolitical, and second one is economic. However, in the past, the Russian-Latin American relations have been historically very weak. And Russia's diplomatic relations with Latin America first began in 1828 with Brazil. And Brazil was achieved its independence in 1822, and its ties were officially established with Argentina in 1885 and with Mexico in 1890. Actually, Brazil and Mexico is the main trading partner for Russia. I will show you the statistical resources. And with the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, the US proclaimed that European powers, including any other external powers, should not intervene in the internal affairs of American nations. So Russia's relations with Latin America thus remained historically very weak. And during the Cold War era, Russia and Latin America relations were still weak, and Latin America remained under the US control, as you might know, in the post-war bipolar world, with its foreign policy based on economic and military aid provided by the US. And at that time, during the Cold War, communist parties or communist forces were severely suppressed in Latin America. And they were rarely allowed to participate in government. Despite this, the USSR maintained commercial ties with a number of Latin American countries, particularly Cuba, right? The Cuban Revolution. If we look at Cuban Revolution, you might know that Russia and Cuba are both very historically strong and deep partner in Latin America. And the Cuban Revolution had a significant influence on regional, foreign, and domestic affairs. And Cuba, which was expelled from the Organization of American States. The Organization of American States is an international organization, the regional organization that promote the cultural and political and economic ties within the Americas. So it consists of 35 countries, 35 states, 33 states from Latin America and the Caribbean, and the United States and Canada. And anyway, the Cuba was expelled from the OAS and supported communist guerrilla groups, primarily in Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru, with Soviet financial backing, while the US provided military and economic support to military dictatorships willing to contain potential communist advances. So we can say that the Latin America is also became the battlefield between the US and the Russia during the Cold War. And if you look at Russia's presence in Latin America during the post-Cold War era, the 1990s, the Russians' presence were also weak, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and which brought the Cold War to an end, reshaped Russia-Latin American relations. And the end of the Cold War marked the loss of superpower status for the Soviet Union, and then the gradual withdrawal of Russia from the main battlefields of the Soviet-US rivalry of the Cold War. And the Russia Federation was given permanent observer status in the OAS in 1992, but Moscow's influence in Latin America in the 1990s were very weak. But since Vladimir Putin took office as president of the Russian Federation in 2000, and particularly since 2008, Russia has increased and re-emerged in Latin America through high-level bilateral meeting. And Russia began its gradual return to Latin America in the second half of the 2000s with loans and arms sales to Venezuela in 2005. But Russia's engagement in traditional measures such as commerce and investment, diplomatic activity, and arms sales remains low in comparison to the rest of the world. And this is the Russian arms sales to Latin America, the share of Russian arms sales to Latin America between 1992 to 2017, and Venezuela. As we examine, Venezuela accounts for about 73%, and other Mexico, Peru, and other Latin American countries. And if you look at this graph, the share of Latin American trade, we can see that the influence of the US in terms of trade is steadily decreasing, while the yellow line, China, is still increasing, right? China has been becoming one of the most influential player in the region, in the Latin America. In particular in Brazil, which is one of the most largest country and most populous country, and which has a great military and economic power in the region. China accounts for the share of trade between China and Brazil accounts for 32% of total trade, while the US has been still decreasing under 20%. But if you look at the EU is also one of the major players in Latin America due to its historical and cultural ties, which can date back to the colonial era. But if you look at Russia here, it's very comparatively low. Russia shows the low share of Latin American trade in the region. So we can say that Russian influence in economy is very weak, still weak in the region. And Russian imports from and exports to Latin America, and this is the result of the 2017, and Brazil accounts for 43.7% of Russian imports and 36.1% the exports, Russian exports. So Brazil is the main trading partner for Russia and Mexico. And Russia and Mexico can be considered as a major trading partner in the region. And let's look at Russia's interest in Latin America. And Moscow may no longer seek to use the ideology of socialism to strengthen ties with Latin American countries as in the past, but it is seeking to exploit a shared desire for multilateralism in political, economic, and security relations. And also, Russia's presence in Latin America forms part of a broader international strategy whose main objective is to achieve the status of a major power able to undermine the US leadership in the region and in the international order, and competing with the other major emerging power, China. So in Latin America, Russia is seeking to build a system of international relations free from the US hegemony, working with China insofar as possible. So Russia's main interests in Latin America can be geopolitical issues. And Russia's major interests are the multipolar world and multilateralism. And this is the BRICS, a very famous international organization. BRICS is an actually very important and crucial part of Russian attempts to pursue a multi-vector policy that is not reliant solely on Western dominated institutions. So BRICS was initially established in 2006, and the first summit meeting was held in 2009. And Russia is, for Russia, BRICS is one of the very important diplomatic tools to achieve the multipolar world. And also we witnessed the recent Russia's vaccine diplomacy in Latin America as well. And Latin America was actually the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic since the last year, the March last year. And Latin America actually asked for pandemic help, and Russia and China heard that call, and they are actively helping delivering the vaccines to Latin American countries. But the recent news reports mentioned that Russia fails to deliver on promise of Sputnik vaccines, and it was delayed. So it remains to be seen whether Russia's vaccine diplomacy would be successful in Latin America or not. And let's look at the Russia's image as well. This is a study conducted by Pew Research Center, a global attitude survey in 2019. Russia's image was very relatively positive in Korea, South Korea, and Philippines and India. However, if you look at the other areas such as Africa or Middle East or Latin America as well, Russia's image is still relatively unfavorable, we can say. But Brazil shows a 34% and Argentina 36%. I believe without a doubt, Russia has actually soft power ambitions. But I think Russia's soft power is still under construction. So Russia's slow mastering of contemporary approaches to soft power was due to the conservatism of Russian diplomacy. So I think Russia should utilize public diplomacy more actively, or digital public diplomacy using the social network service to make a closer ties with the foreign public to promote the Russians' very, very beautiful cultural assets, as well as Russia's image. That would be a key task for the Russia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Jong, for your very interesting presentation. I understand that at the end you managed to give us an idea of your current research on Russia's image, and it's really nice. So do we have any questions to Professor Jong? Well, I would like to ask you a very brief question regarding the last slides that you showed on Russia's image. Well, there are different parts that elements that make up an image of a country. When you are talking about Russia's image, what elements, components do you include so that we understand on which basis do people in different countries perceive Russia and Russia's image?
Actually, as far as I know, the Pew Research Global Attitude Survey comprises of a survey among the people in each countries, and the image, Russia's specific country's image are also comprised of the questions related to the cultural attractability or attractability of the economic model or political model as well. And I don't know the detailed questions, I cannot remember that, but it actually measures the cultural and economic and political attractability. So that image can be measured by those research questions, survey questions.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Jong, and really I look forward to the results of your ongoing project. Hope that when it's finished and results are released, you will be able to share them with us. We'll be happy to organize a seminar or anything for discussion, but really thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would like to present our last but not least, of course, not least speaker, our colleague, Professor Mikhail Lobanov, who also serves as a Deputy Director of Economics, Russian Academy of Sciences. Professor Lobanov, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to make a presentation on the topic dealing with trade and investment cooperation of Central and Eastern European countries with Asian states. Well, definitely it will consist of two big parts, about the trade, first of all, and then about the investment opportunities and problems of the Asian investors in Central Eastern Asia, Central Eastern, sorry, Europe, and from the Central and Eastern Europe in Asian countries. As for, well, the main idea is to show either this pivot to Asia exists, because it's not only about the US foreign economic relations, not about only the developing world, but also about the region, because a lot of experts and specialists on the Central Eastern Europe spoke about possibility to replace the traditional markets of the European Union and to pay more attention to Asian partners. But still, our investigation shows that this is kind of attempt to reorient towards a small number of Asian countries. I would say that these countries are global and regional economic powers like China, Korea, Japan, or Turkey. And the number of partners is quite low. So it's not a pivot to Asia, but pivot to the regional and global powers, economic powers. On this slide, I would like to show you the dynamics of trade of some Eastern European countries with China and with Asian partners in general. As you can see, in some countries, Chinese trade with China plays a significant role, like 50 or 60%, as we speak about Hungary or Slovakia or Romania, and up to 70-75% if we speak about Poland. And the dynamics is positive in the last 5-6 years. Definitely, we're not speaking about 2020, but before the COVID crisis, situation with the trade with Asia was quite okay. But if we compare the rates of trade, of export and import with the same rates with the European Union, we'll find out the differentiation of the region. So if we speak, for example, about Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Poland, the trade in 21st century with Asia grew faster than with European Union. If we speak, for example, with about some countries of Balkans or even about Hungary and Romania, the situation was completely different. So the Asian partners lacks in the expansion of its export and import. So the region is quite different if we speak about the trade. If we speak about the share of Asia in export and imports of Central Eastern European countries, we'll find out that export diversification with the help of Asia reached its limit in the beginning of 2010s. As you can see here, if we speak about export, the export is even getting, the share of Asia is getting lower and lower in the last 5 or 7 years, or it remained the same if we speak about import. So it's about first of all, about the territorial proximity, about the natural, or we would say geographical limits of the expansion of trade with Asia. Probably the countries of Central Eastern Europe already reached this limit, and it will be quite difficult to expand the share of Asia in its export and import. And definitely structural inertia of foreign economic activities also plays an important role. If we speak about import, I showed you on this graph that the share of import grew in the beginning of 21st century from 10% to 20%. And this situation depends on the Chinese import, first of all, to the region. And the second main factor is the inter-firm commodity flows of goods. It's not about the demand of residential firms, I mean the firms, resident firms of Eastern European countries, but it's about the divisions of Asian transnational corporations in Eastern Europe, because they import the spare parts, then assembly the product in Eastern Europe and then export it. So it twice influence the export and import operations. It's very important if we speak about the trade relations in between Eastern Europe and Asia. Here you can see the geographical structure of trade in 2018. China is on the first place if we speak about imports in 10 countries of 13 countries of the region. On the second place are often Turkey or Republic of Korea. And as for export, the Turkey and China share the first places. I would say 6 countries rely on Turkey. If we speak about export, definitely most towards Balkan countries, but it's interesting, Poland, the Turkey in the export of Poland plays more important role than China. And China, Korea, and in some countries, Japan are the main partners for the export companies if we speak about the other Visegrad countries and the most Balkan countries. And definitely I would say that it's clear that the export to Asia is many times less than import from Asia. So the region has very unfavorable rate, export to import rate. If we consider commodity structure of exports to Asia, we'll find out that machines and equipment, first of all, cars and car components, electrical appliances, electronics, some aircraft parts, they occupy the first place in the commodity structure of the most of the countries, the most developed countries like Czech Republic or Hungary. In Slovakia, it's 75% of export to Asia. So it's a mistake to think that Central Eastern European countries export some food or metal ores or some not complex chemicals. No, they are mostly concentrated on the machines and equipment. Definitely some countries export ores and metals like bauxites from Montenegro or chromites from Albania or copper from Bulgaria, but the most developed countries occupy the medium or upper medium parts of the global value chains, which formed by Asian transnational corporations. If we speak more detail, the machinery export from Visegrad countries to Asia, we will find out that on the first place, cars and car parts, so that companies, automotive companies from Korea, from Japan, that import the assembled cars or some car parts on its territory. And the second place are for electrical appliances, and the third place for computers. Only Poland has more or less diversified structure, which includes some power equipment, some railway or aircraft products, and so on. The biggest, except China, the biggest importer of goods from Central Eastern Europe is Turkey. Here you can see that Turkey, Japan, and Republic of Korea are mostly depend on machines and equipment that produced in Central Eastern Europe. As for imports from Asia, the structure is nearly the same. On the first place, machines and equipment, the same product that I already noticed. Maybe some chemicals and some products of textile and apparel garment industry has biggest share than in export from Europe to Asia. But generally, we could say that the trade is intra-branch trade more than the trade in between different branches. Also, the situation is nearly the same when we speak about the exports from Turkey and Republic of Korea to Eastern Europe. maybe the most interesting is the big share of textile and apparel from Turkey, or for example, the big share of chemicals from India and Israel. Definitely it's about the pharmaceuticals, complex pharmaceuticals from Israel, and cheap generics from India that they send to Eastern European market. And the second part about investment, the investment from Asia in Eastern Europe started in the beginnings of 90s with the help of automotive giants from Japan and Korea. First of all, Suzuki and Deo. It was greenfield and brownfield investments. Then the second stage, I would say, in the beginning of 21st century, when the biggest investment deals were realized. And we argue in our investigation that the expansion of Asian capital in the region stopped 15 years ago. So the last biggest deals, important deals, they were realized 15 years ago. Not only by Korea and Japan, but also by Hong Kong, by mainland China, by Taiwanese investors, by Singapore and Israel. As you can see here on this graph, FDI inward stock for these years. The share of Asia is quite small. It's about 3 or 5% in the most of the countries. Even just in Slovakia, it's like 7% help, thanks for Korean automotive companies, as you can see here on the graph. And definitely it depends on some big deals. It's not like it has quite big fluctuations. And in the last year, these fluctuations were very visible. The enlargement of the European Union plays an important role for the investment, realization of investment projects in the region, because enlargement influenced the external tariff growth in these countries. And then Korean and Japanese companies decided to make more FDI in electronics and electronic appliances, because it was cheaper to build a factory and to then import the production household appliance to Japanese market from Central Eastern Europe. It is so-called tariff jumping procedure. So it was the second stage of the development of the investment. And the third stage started from the crisis of 2008, 2009. And it's mostly about the Chinese companies that are quite, I would say very, not aggressive, but they're very interested in the assets in the European Union and in Central Eastern Europe, mostly troubled assets. The examples of investment in Hungary, in Serbia, and Poland, it's all about the financially unstable companies and troubled assets that Chinese companies are interested in. Definitely there are different reasons of Asian companies' interest in the region. First of all, it's market seeking motive, because they're interested in big European market. Second, the cost reduction. As you can see here on the graph, average personal costs and wages in the countries of the region are many times less than in European Union in average, except for Slovenia. And it's interesting that the rates of the growth of personal costs in the last 10 years in some countries of the region were slower than in the European Union. So we can't speak about that the countries of the region already lost the good factor to invite, to attract the investor. So they still possess this factor. And accept the average costs and the possibility to attract the investor. It's a motive that not very important, but for some countries like China, it has an importance. They are resource-seeking investors. They are very interested in rare earth metals, you definitely know that not only the Western companies from Australia or UK are interested in rare metals in Europe and Eastern Europe, but also Chinese started a very big game in the region, started to get the access to it. And the fourth motive, it's interesting, but it's know-how seeking. I would say strategic asset seeking also deals with Chinese companies that started to make mergers and acquisitions deals in aircraft industry in Eastern Europe, in some machinery, general machinery industry, and some experts think that the main idea is to get access to know-how and some technological some innovations that these countries of the region possess. And if we speak about this amounts of FDI from the region, from Visegrad countries in Asia, definitely it's many times less than the investment from Asia to Eastern Europe. But it's interesting that some countries like Hungary has a big share of Asian countries in outward stock of FDI. It's up to 15%. It's quite big share, dealing with, if we speak about the possibility of the country of Hungary to export the capital. Definitely, it's because of the Hungary started to develop foreign markets before the Czech Republic or Poland or Slovakia. They started to do it in the beginning of 90s, and they have some quite big, I would say, transnational corporations. But generally, most of the countries of the region, they have lack of mature transnational corporation that could export capital not only for the neighbors, like in Austria, for example, but definitely in Asia. And definitely neighborhood effect plays role. Territorial proximity also plays role. So we also can't rely on some big amount of money that could Eastern European companies invest in Asia. The biggest market for the money from the Eastern Europe are Turkey, India, and thanks to Hungary, it's Israel market. And the last slide of my presentation is just one slide of the present day situation after during the COVID crisis. On the example of Serbia, because Serbia is the main partner of China in Southeast Europe, and we compared the situation with FDI from the biggest partners of Serbia in 2020, and as you can see here, all the investors, including Russia, France, Austria, Italy, United Emirates, they reduced FDI to nearly zero, except for Germany and China. Some investigations show that not only Serbia has the same situation. So Chinese investors they didn't notice the COVID crisis if we speak about the FDI investment in the Central Eastern Asia. So we could maybe in 2-3 years, it will be possible to compare the traditional investors and the Chinese investment in the region and to make some conclusions on it. Thank you very much. And if you have questions, please, I would like to answer it.
Thank you, Professor Lobanov. It was a nice change of angle from Russia to East Asia and how countries of East Asia came to play a prominent role in the trade and investment landscape of some of the post-Soviet states. I see that we have a question from Professor Golovnin. Please, Professor Golovnin.
Mikhail, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I have a question on the structure of Asian investments into Central and European countries. You have noticed that according to stocks, mostly Republic of Korea and Japan are main investors, but we have heard that during last at least several years, China had a great interest in the region, and based on the flows data on Serbia, you have already shown that there is a rising inflow of Chinese investments into this country. So what is the situation with other countries? Is it the results of accumulated investments and now the flows from China are rising or not? Or simply as in Russia, we have not seen the large inflow of FDI from China?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mikhail Yurich, for the question. Yes, the Chinese investments are very, how to say, media and the society of the countries, Central Eastern European countries, plays very high accent and importance to Chinese investment. If we compare the amount of Chinese investment with Korean or Japanese, it's as you can see here on the graph, it's many times less. But the Chinese investors come to very, I would say, not only strategic, but very important areas of local economies. And that's why the societies and media plays an important, pay an important attention to it. They come to a research area, production of extraction of different ores, very important ores, non-ferrous and rare metals. They come to metallurgy, non-ferrous and ferrous metallurgy, and they invest definitely in infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and definitely if you have a new bridge or a new highway in your country that links you with your partners, with your neighbors, you will pay more attention to it than to hundreds of companies from Japan that concentrated near one assembly car plant and so on. That's why it's mostly more about the how the people perceive this investment. But it's interesting that, as I said, it's interesting to see what will happen in the next years to compare the possibility of China to remain the at least the fourth or the fifth investor in the region. And definitely the number of companies, Chinese companies, less than the companies from Japan. They're mostly big state companies in comparison with small or medium enterprises from Japan that concentrated around the, for example, car plant or electrical appliance plant. The same situation with Korean investors.
Thank you. I think that we can now open a discussion, and please, those who are remaining, you can ask questions also to Professor Labanov and to other participants who presented earlier. And I see a raised hand. Professor Haber, please. Yeah, sure.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, professors. I'd like to ask you a little subtle point. China and CEE countries have strong economic ties in investment and trade, but recently the Czech Republic and Lithuania have converted their economic and political ties from China to Taiwan. Is it any economic change? Can you see some change of investment or some change of trade? Well, thank you very much.
May I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I didn't have time to speak in detail with 16+1 or 17+1 initiative. Yes, you are right. It depends on the present-day political situation in Czech Republic and Lithuania, because in political elites, in the Czech political elites, there are two different groups. One group is oriented towards Taiwan because they work in the business linked to Taiwanese companies, electronic appliances, Taiwanese companies, that plays an important role in Czech Republic for the budget of Czech Republic, for employment. That's why they are, how to say, influence the political agenda because of, for example, I think because of some political interests and some economic interests. As for Lithuania, they started to get out from the Chinese initiative 2 years ago, and as you know, this year they stopped its cooperation with 17+1, and I definitely there is nothing for China. If we speak about the investment from China to Central Eastern region, Lithuania plays a not very important role at all. And definitely it's all about politics. And maybe they will want to get some extra points from the Brussels, from the European Union. And I would say it's quite risky politics because they will be out of the process of Chinese economic cooperation for the many years. And as for Czech Republic, I would say if the political situation will change, maybe to more oriented to cooperation with China, then the situation will be more better to Czech-Chinese cooperation. It's still about the local political elites.
Right. It's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Do we have any more questions? I would like to ask a question, Professor Kim from Seoul, who presented earlier on the Arctic development and possible framework for Russia-Korea cooperation. My question is, I've recently participated in a number of events where South Korean speakers talked a lot about Korea's interest for the Arctic. But when we look at the real cooperation, we can see that, well, China is much ahead in terms of developing Arctic roads for transportation of containers from Asia to Europe. And it seems that like somehow Korea talks about its interest, but it doesn't declare that interest with any practical steps. Or am I wrong? Maybe you have more information with regard to that. So what's Korea's real preparedness to cooperate on Arctic with Russia? Professor Bong-Chul Kim, I was asking, I'm not sure whether you have an answer to this question. You need to unmute yourself, yeah.
That is very different, difficult to make the very good answer in a short word. Many countries have different stance, different position, different interest. So yeah, even Russia has a different attitude to the other countries. For example, in East Asia, China, Japan, and Korea, I mean, in the Korean Peninsula, there's 2 Koreas. So Russian government must show the different strategy and policy and attitude to each country in East Asia. Investment, for example, as the Mr. Lobanov mentioned, it is a quite complicated situation. Even if one country poured money to the other countries, their interest in a specific industry or area, and that industry must very different interest to the other country. For example, recently China, recent days, China has a bit difficulties regarding the supplies of coals and some part of natural resources. So that means Chinese government must expand their supplies of those kind of part of natural resources, and that means it can be a solutions of the cooperation point the other country, as Russia and the other East Asian area. Yeah. Considering the global economic the relationship. The problem of Chinese economy is not just the problem of that country. We know that the Russian society and the economy may have the huge impact from the Chinese standards, and of course Japanese and Korean society as well. So the investors, yeah, we know that if we invest some money to a certain country, that may make the influence the other country. So I mean, Arctic region, yeah. Even if I mentioned about some legal solutions on that, but yeah, it's too hard to make the one world solution. If I know that, I must meet the president of the Russian government or United States. Yeah, I'm very sorry to make those kind of funny expression, but yeah, must be an assignment for us. That's why we came here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand it's quite a difficult situation. Yeah.
Excuse me, may I continue with this discussion?
Sure.
Because really I have a question for our guests from Asia, because on example of Russia, I haven't seen the statistics for other countries, but we cannot see a large inflow of FDI either from Japan or Republic of Korea or from China. What are, from your point of view, the main impediments? Because as I can see, they are not just sanctions, because even before sanctions, we haven't seen a large inflow of capital. And probably the same question, if you know something for other CIS countries, which we are discussing today. So I know that this is rather a broad question, but maybe you somehow react with why the answer of Professor Kim somehow make me answer this question.
Yeah, I don't know why I have to make my opinion. When I research on the Arctic regions, I realized that Arctic region is not just the certain area for one country or certain related country. It is our international society's area, and also we must protect this area. Even though we can make some money from there, we have to protect for our next generation. That's why we have to consider the concept of sustainability. So, I mean, I know that sustainability issues and concept is not always useful for any cases, but even I think I'm in the economic area, investment area, and the governmental solutions or negotiations with other countries. The concept is the new trend of this concept can be very useful to make our common point. Yes, Professor Golovnin said that South Korea, yes, the small country in the area, we have many problems, as we know. North Korea always try to make the nuclear weapons, and the South Korea is surrounded by the big country. It's like an island, and these, including me, many Koreans wants to make the big road to the Russia and China. Yes, Japan, I think, also wants to do that. So yeah, if we can make the big avenue from Japan to Russia to Moscow, that will be a very nice solution, very good solution. But we have many obstacles. Yeah, not just the economy issues, but also political things. South Korea recently, we are not. I'm not the representative of the South Korean government, but South Korea recently we have to make the balance between big countries among the big countries. Yeah, as the director of the Institute of EU Studies, small country in the European area, like is the similar situation. So South Korea can, I mean, yeah, it is also a assignment for the burden of the South Korea, but it is also can be a function of South Korea to make the balance among the big boys. So that means if Russia and the other countries have some a bit sensitive issues, then South Korea can be a kind of the smoothie oil. Yeah, I think I'm a small country. The function of small countries like that. Yeah, I hope that Korea must be a big country, but we cannot avoid the effect. Therefore, even if the South Korea make the economic cooperation with the big country, Russia, for example, natural economic development project, then South Korea just be a part of the big project. So that means Russian government, Russian companies' economy must invite other countries as well, such as China and Japan. Yeah, I'm very sorry again. I have made you too much talk. That's it.
Thank you. But it seems for me that South Korea is economically large enough.
Yeah, Professor.
If it's not territorially large, it's rather large.
I will meet you in Moscow next year, and we can talk more deep way. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Yes, Professor Haber, you're free.
May? Oh, thank you very much. I want to ask Yosha, is it possible? I heard it was very interesting that military relation between the Philippines and Russia were strengthening in the South China Sea. However, as it is well known, there is a growing military conflict between China and the US, UK in the South China Sea. What kind of military cooperation does the Philippine and Russia military relation have with the Quad Plus and AUKUS? Or with how about the relationship between Philippines and China or Philippines and India? This is the first one. And also, I think the Philippines has a well-balanced relationship in economy with the United States and China. So, but how do you think the relationship between the Philippines and Russia economic relation strongly interdependent in time of economics? Thank you very much.
And if I may jump in, because my question is somewhat similar to Professor Haber. I would like to ask about your perspective indeed on Russia-Philippines relations, because in your presentation, you mentioned the Indo-Pacific region, but we know that this is a concept promoted directly by the US, and so far Russia doesn't support that concept and is actually against it. So in light of this new concept that Philippines seems not to openly support, but somehow be in favor of it, influence prospects of Philippine and Russia cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for these challenging questions, if I may. For this trilateral dynamics happening amongst great powers, I believe that the long-standing policy of of the Philippines has been to find diverse sources for its for seeking its economic and security interests. And one point would be this, that the Philippines, although it has a strong economic relations with China, I think that this is a public opinion. I'm getting my views from public opinion. Many of my countrymen believe that we cannot exchange economic prosperity with our sovereignty and territorial integrity. So, as you can see here, even though we are trying to remove this kind of thinking, I don't really think that decoupling of our economies would be possible. In fact, I would see here that in the next decades, that the Philippines, at a time when it's struggling in the middle of the pandemic, would really try to sharpen these relations. And I think this is where cooperation in the South China Sea would come in. That if the Philippines is really concerned about averting major power conflict in the region, we can see for the next administration we can see in the next administration of presidents that this is a very dire foreign policy concern. Not to decouple our economy with China, but also making sure that China would not be that China would be fulfilling what it says from the closed door meeting. And as I said already, Russia in this equation would be in a delicate situation, because I would argue that Moscow is barred by both China and the US in increasing its role here in Southeast Asia in general. And the likely behavior of Moscow for the next decades would be silently achieving its interests here. It could be cooperation on counterterrorism, energy deals, and the increasing FDI between two countries and the like. But nevertheless, that's just it. Nothing more. And with concerns on the Indo-Pacific, I anticipated this, and I had many consultations with. Am I sure to include the term Indo-Pacific here? But again, I am presenting from a Philippine perspective, and that yes, it is. Many analysts have been arguing that Indo-Pacific concept is a Western-centric, more so, and Washington-centric approach, contain China. However, I believe that other countries, especially ASEAN countries, are trying to find a more flexible concept of this geographic Indo-Pacific region. In fact, you would see the ASEAN, the 2019 ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. We're trying to find get different sources. That Indo-Pacific is not just about containing China, but it's also about strengthening our blue water economies. Yes. So I think this is where Russia can come in. That as it tries to expand, because historically it's always been from expanding, but I think by considering the blue water economy prospects, we can see Russia working along these lines.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I join with thanking Joshua for his excellent reply. Do we have any more questions to our remaining participants? If not, then I suggest that we close the conference, because we are here together almost 4 hours, and it's been quite a long time, and I understand that due to time difference, it's already late in Tokyo, Philippines, Seoul, Busan, and all the other cities present here. So I think that we had a fruitful discussion and we learned a lot from each other. And it's time to close. So to close our conference, I would like to invite First Deputy Director of the Institute of Economics, Professor Golovnin. Please, Professor Golovnin, floor is yours.
Thank you, Irina. I think it was a very interesting conference, a very interesting discussion, wide range of questions, which is, of course, larger when we announced the title of the conference. And of course, we have some more specific accent on Russian economy, as the largest Russian economy is the largest one among post-Soviet countries. And there were very interesting reports on demographic trends in Russia, on financial market developments, on COVID-19 response, and all of these reports centered around Russia. Very interesting report of Professor Vardomsky, which is just in the center of the topic because it was connected with the whole post-Soviet space and its development and the role of the region, I mean Asian region in this post-Soviet space. I think it is important that we also covered some practical issues, mainly the Arctic one, yes, about the Arctic and about the north route. So this can be one of the concrete projects which Professor Vardomsky mentioned in his report. So if we talk about a broad Eurasian integration, which holds together Europe and Asia, and it was also discussed during our last questions, and I think this could be one of the projects which brings together our parts. And it seems important that we also covered some political questions in Central Asia region, on Indian and Pacific Oceans, and of course political questions. Of course, it is important part. It is why concrete important part, but it can be divided from the economy. We know how nowadays the sanctions, which are politically backed, now impact Russian economy and the whole interaction on the space, of course. So I think it is very important that yes, and very important, very interesting report of Professor Lobanov on this bridge between Central and Eastern Europe and Asian countries, and this somehow holds out the whole picture of this Eurasian space. So between Europe and Asia directly. So I think it's a very interesting discussion, very interesting reports, and thank you everyone who have participation in it. Thank you, Irina, for your moderation, and good luck, and have a good new results, research results. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Golovnin. I'm just joining Professor Golovnin in thanking all of you for your excellent presentations and excellent questions. And we hope to see you again, but in Moscow, if you're able to come and see us. And in any case, we always have Zoom. And thank you again, and let's have a round of applause to all of you, and then successfully close this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.